Good evening. I'm calling the meeting of December 5th of the Planning Commission, Camarillo City Planning Commission, to order. And welcome to all of you here that are in the audience and those of you that are watching at home. With that, we'll go to Pledge of Allegiance to Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone please rise and face the flag? Ready? Begin.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first thing I kind of overlooked a little bit, can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Davidson.
Present.
Commissioner Murphy.
Here.
Commissioner Lamone.
Present.
Vice Chair Edsel.
Here.
And Chair Vandermeulen.
Here, thank you. So the next thing on the agenda is public comments for items that are not on the agenda tonight. So do we have any? Pardon? Oh. I am mixed up. Okay, I'll put my glasses on. Hold on here. So we will go back to the consent calendar, which is just the one item on minutes. Did anybody find anything? Corrections? Yes.
I had some as a minor correction, but I think the time start, they had us starting at 6 and finishing at 6:13. I don't think we were that quick, but I think it was 6:30 and probably supposed to be 7:13. Everything else was fine. That's small, but might as well be accurate.
Anything
We'll make
else?
that change, thank you.
Okay, can we have a,
With that correction, move to accept the minutes as presented.
okay. Okay, so we have a first by Commissioner Murphy and a second by Commissioner Davidson. And please vote. Okay, then we can go to public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any cards at all? Okay. And then I will not open public comments at this time. With that, we will go to item B, which is our first item. And do we have a staff report?
Yes, we have a staff presentation. Jackie Lee, our planning manager, is going to kick it off. But however, before we start that, I just want to point out there is a clerical error on the agenda. Under item B, the environmental document is the second subsequent MND.
Okay. All right. So do we have a report on this? Oh,
Yes, I'll be giving the report.
Thank you,
very
Jackie.
much, Chair Vandermeulen, Vice Chair Edsel, members of the Planning Commission. The application before you is for a modification to Commercial Plan Development Permit 226 for the development of approximately 20 acres into a 163,397 square foot retail warehouse and the construction of a freestanding fuel facility. The applicant is also requesting a conditional use permit for the off-sales of alcoholic beverages. The project is located south of the 101 freeway, north of West Ventura Boulevard, east of Springville Drive, and west of the Home Depot in the Commercial Plan Development Zone. And it is located within the Airport North Specific Plan area. Just to provide you some background on this project site, back in 2007, the City Council approved CPD 226 and a conditional use permit for the construction of a 499,000 square foot commercial center, which was known as Paseo Camino Real Shopping Center. In 2011, the Planning Commission approved a modification to that to accommodate a home improvement store. The project was allowed for an overall square footage not to exceed 499,000 square feet. In 2016, the Planning Commission approved another modification for the Amara Shopping Center. The shopping center development anticipated a variety of commercial uses with a square footage not to exceed 499,000 square feet. And this is an aerial view of the project site with Ventura Boulevard to the north to the south, and US Highway 101 to the north, and Home Depot just to the east. And the Costco facility is proposing to take half of the previously approved shopping center site. Vehicular access to the Costco facility will be provided via 2 driveways off of West Ventura Boulevard, as well as a connection to Overland Road at the northeastern corner of the project site. The westerly driveway on West Ventura Boulevard will be signalized. And here's a close-up view of the proposed site plan. The project requires a total of 788 parking spaces, and the site plan shows that a total of 901 parking spaces will be provided, which will result in a surplus of 113 parking spaces. The project is required to provide a number of these stalls for accessible and electric vehicle charging stalls based on the building code requirements that are in effect at the time of plan check. Truck loading for the warehouse is proposed at the northeastern side of the building. The loading dock area will be depressed 4 feet below grade to accommodate larger delivery trucks, and it will include 4 side-by-side loading bays. A smaller grade door is located on the east side of the building. The fuel station is proposed to be located at the most northwestern portion of the Costco site. The gas station includes an 11,000 square foot canopy, and it will dispense both regular and premium grades of fuel. There will be 4 covered fueling bays, each with 4 gas pumps, which fuel 2 cars each. This results in 16 fueling dispensers that will provide a fueling capacity for 32 cars at a time. A proposed stacking area will accommodate for an additional 42 cars waiting to get to the fueling position. The gas station is located in the most remote part of the site, which is specifically designed to avoid traffic and queuing conflicts with the warehouse and spill over onto the street. The pumps will be fully automated and self-service for Costco members only, with a tenant present to direct vehicles and oversee operations. The Costco warehouse building, this is a floor plan, which shows that the customer entrance will be located at the building's most northwestern corner. And the building will include a bakery, a pharmacy, an optical center with optical exams and retail optical sales, hearing aid and hearing testing. There's also an indoor food court and a photo center, along with the sales of over 4,000 different products. And the building will also have a tire located at the west side of the building. And Costco is proposing to sell a variety of alcoholic beverages, which will be required to obtain a Type 21 off-sale general alcoholic beverage control license, which authorizes the sale of beer, wine, and distilled spirits for consumption off the premises. The floor plan shows that the liquor sales will utilize 1,980 square feet of interior space and will be located toward the back of the warehouse. The project is located within the city's heritage zone, which requires projects within 500 feet of the freeway to have a Mission, Monterey, Early California, Spanish Mediterranean, or modern interpretation of these styles. The proposed warehouse is designed in an early California style of architecture and provides arches along an entry colonnade, a sloped roof at the main entry, hip tower roofs, materials that include clay roof tiles, textured exterior wall panels, dark bronze cornice, limestone, and brick veneers. And here is the colors and materials board, which does provide for the earth tone colors in keeping with the heritage zone. And this is just an example of a store that was constructed that will utilize these wall panels that are proposed, which also provides a stucco finish with a very small seam between the panels. And this is the entry perspective, which would be located right on the corner of the building. And this is the elevations for the fuel canopy, which also utilizes the materials as a warehouse, including the clay roof tiles and brick veneer. And at this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Michael Brown with Cadence Environmental Consultants, and he will provide a discussion on CEQA. And then after Michael Brown, we will have Jason Samonte, the city's traffic engineer, provide an overview on traffic, and then I will round out the presentation after that. So I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening, Chair Vandermeulen, Vice Chair Edsel, and members of the Planning Commission. It's good to see you all again. And let's see, how does this, this way, okay. So I'm not going to repeat what Jackie said, but as she showed, there was the original proposal for development of the project site back in 2007. And in addition to the development of that 499,000 square foot commercial center, that project also included the extension of Ventura Boulevard from the eastern site boundary over to Bajo Aqua Avenue. And that improvement was completed in 2008 with funding provided by the original project applicant. So that's the only component of the original approval that has been completed to date. The potential environmental impacts of that project were evaluated in a mitigated negative declaration, number 2006-17. That was adopted by the City Council when it approved the project. So just for clarification, a mitigated negative declaration may be prepared when an initial study analysis demonstrates that while the project could have a significant effect on the environment, it would not do so in this case because mitigation measures capable of reducing the impacts of the project to less than significant levels have been identified and agreed to by the project proponent. In contrast, an environmental impact report would be required if an initial analysis determines that the project may have a significant environmental impact and mitigation has not been identified, or if it is known that the project would have a significant and unavoidable impact on the environment. The second approval for development of the site occurred in 2011, once again with that modification for the home improvement center there. And once again, the overall project, 499,000 square foot assumption there. The potential environmental impacts associated with that project were evaluated in an addendum to MND 2006-17. And that MND identified mitigation measures to reduce all potentially significant environmental impacts to less than significant levels. And for additional clarification here, mitigation measures are project-specific actions that go beyond standard regulatory requirements, meaning we're not going to necessarily list all of the regulatory requirements in a document. It's assumed that those would be complied with because it is required. So mitigation is what is necessary to address project-specific impacts that go beyond those regulations. Now, to provide some information here, revisions to a previously adopted MND are addressed in section 15162 of the state CEQA guidelines. which state that a subsequent M&D can be required when substantial changes are proposed which require major revisions to a previously adopted MND due to new potentially significant environmental effects or a substantial increase in the severity of previously identified potentially significant impacts, or when substantial changes occur under which a project would be undertaken and it requires major revisions to the previous MND, or when there is new information of substantial importance that was not known at the time of the previous environmental document's approval. A different document, a supplement to an adopted MND, may be prepared when any of the changes to a project would require the preparation of a subsequent MND, but only minor additions or changes would be necessary to make the previous MND adequately apply to the project in the changed condition. And the third option is an addendum to an adopted MND, which may be prepared when only minor technical changes or additions are necessary to bring that document applicable to the project. Once again, for the 2011 approval, that was able to be accomplished with an addendum to the previously adopted MND. The third approval of development at the site, as Jackie said, occurred in 2016 with the approval of CPD 2026 M3, the third modification, which was a major modification there. And although that site plan was for a smaller envelope there, the impacts for that project were evaluated in a subsequent MND due to the substantial, major modification there. So that was a subsequent MND, and that document continued to assume up to 499,000 square feet of commercial uses. And CPD 226 M3 represents the current approval for development of the overall property. So Jackie went over the current request for the proposed project here. And once again, it is a major modification to an approved project, and it includes a new use, the fuel station, that was not envisioned with the approved project. And the requested actions involve an amount of development that is still within the building envelope for the adopted MND, subsequent MND, and the future second phase of the Amara Shopping Center, which is the remainder of the site, not including the Costco portion there, would be developed with the remaining, is assumed to be developed with the remaining 335,823 square feet of total building area of the approved 499,000 square feet. Because due to the major modification and the new use, the potential environmental impacts of the project were evaluated in a draft second subsequent MND. So the draft second subsequent MND summarizes the analyses and conclusions of the previous environmental documents and evaluates the potential impacts of the proposed project based on the thresholds of significance formally adopted in the City of Camarillo CEQA environmental guidelines. No new significant impacts have been identified that would require the preparation of a subsequent environmental impact report, as opposed to the draft second subsequent MND. The draft second subsequent MND was circulated for public review for 20 days earlier this last month. And by the end of the public review period, the city had received 12 letters, emails, and online form submittals commenting on the project and/or the draft document. The identified topics included support for the project, opposition to the project, request for preparation of a subsequent, or questioning why there was the preparation of the subsequent MND rather than an EIR. Independent analysis, impacts to biological resources, emissions from idling vehicles, project-specific and cumulative traffic impacts, trip generation rates, air quality mitigation measures, cumulative air quality impacts, electric vehicle charging, airport noise, fuel station noise, and light and hydrology. Responses to the comments have been prepared and included in the preliminary final second subsequent MND that's been published and provided for your review. And the comments did not result in changes to the conclusions of the draft second subsequent MND. I'd like to point out that today the city received 3 letters from Ventura County from various departments. We have Public Works, and they commented on hydrology, basically reiterating the drainage system that's proposed for the project and saying that it does not cause impacts to county resources. We received one from Ventura County Environmental Health saying that the proposed uses have to comply with their regulations. And the third one was from the Air Pollution Control District, and they were requesting some updates to the mitigation measures in the document, just to bring it up to date to current standards. And we're in agreement with those revisions. And so should the project be approved and the second subsequent MND be approved, those revisions will be provided in the final document.
Okay.
Staff asked for some further clarification and to be presented, just to maybe help address some issues that may be of continued concern here. So one of these is with regards to cumulative air quality impacts. And Ventura County is a moderate non-attainment area for ozone under national standards and a non-attainment area under state standards. So therefore, any emissions generated by a new development project, any project, would contribute to cumulative air quality impacts. The applicable threshold of significance under CEQA is, would the project result in a cumulatively considerable net increase of ROC and/or NOx emissions? So the APCD neither recommends quantified analyses of cumulative operational emissions, nor provides methodologies or thresholds of significance to be used to assess cumulative construction and/or operational impacts. Instead, the APCD's 25 pounds per day of ROC or NOx thresholds are used to determine whether the contribution of the project to cumulative air quality impacts is considerable under CEQA. The project has been evaluated against these thresholds, and mitigation is provided to reduce the impact to a less than significant level. With regards to air quality mitigation, one of the main mitigation measures for operational emissions, especially from commercial projects where the majority of emissions are generated by motor vehicles traveling to and from a site, and that they are from drivers who are not employees of the facility. So these are not commute vehicles, these are shopping vehicles, so it's not as though an applicant can reduce the number of vehicles to their commercial project for customers. So one of the main measures that the APC recommends to reduce to a less than significant level is the contribution to a city-managed transportation demand management fund, a TDM fund. And this is established by the city to help reduce motor vehicle use citywide, because project emissions are not isolated, they are part of the regional landscape. So therefore, if you can reduce emissions elsewhere within your jurisdiction, you are still reducing regional emissions. So example programs include bicycle paths and lanes, public transit service, van pool programs and subsidies, rideshare assistance programs, off-site TDM facilities, EV charging locations and equipment. And this, once again, this reduces emissions on a regional basis. The draft second subsequent MND identifies the proportionate contributions for the proposed Costco and the future second phase, apologize for that one there, of the Amara Shopping Center that would be contributed by each of those portions of development. Under hazards and hazardous materials, in addition to the proposed fuel facility, the proposed tire center may involve the routine transport, storage, and installation of automobile batteries which contain hazardous materials. The applicant may be able to confirm for you whether or not that is going to occur, but for the purpose of disclosure, we want to present that to you. And that the transport, storage, and installation of the batteries would be required to comply with all applicable standard practices and regulations. Also, the 4 underground fuel tanks at the fuel facility have the potential to leak over time, which could create a significant hazard to the public or the environment. However, as with all gas stations in California, underground storage tanks are monitored on a regular basis to ensure that any leaks are detected shortly after beginning and remediated before major leaks can occur. Perhaps the applicant can present to you what their standard practice and operations are for their fuel facilities throughout California. With regards to hydrology and water quality, fueling operations at the fuel facility have the potential to contribute to petrochemicals to the project storm drain system. However, the storm drain system has been designed to accommodate all runoff from the project site and to comply with the requirements of the regional municipal separate stormwater system, the MS4 permit for LA and Ventura counties as implemented by the city, or the current permit in effect and related requirements of the Ventura County Technical Guidance Manual for stormwater quality control measures. Also, the project would be required to develop a post-construction stormwater management plan in accordance with the city's municipal stormwater permit, and that this will address all of the requirements to address city standards there. Perhaps if you have additional questions on specifics on that, perhaps Public Works staff can assist you with that. I'm now going to turn it over to Jason.
Thank you.
Chair Van der Meulen, Vice Chair Edsel, Planning Commissioners, thank you. Happy to be here. Tonight I wanted to review the traffic mitigations related to the entitlement of this parcel. Yeah, well, here we go. So traffic mitigation 1 was the developer was to pay the mitigation fee as established by the Camarillo Municipal Code. The funds could be used if necessary, deemed necessary, the widening of Las Posas Road between Ventura Boulevard and Daly Drive to add an additional northbound travel lane over the US 101 freeway. This just shows Las Posas Road between Ventura Boulevard and East Daly Drive. Traffic condition 2, a little bit more specific. It was for northbound Las Posas Road for the improvements of a total of 3 12-foot northbound through lanes, a bicycle lane, a dedicated 12-foot wide northbound right turn lane, and 2 11-foot northbound left turn lanes, as well as raised median. And you can see here, well, it's kind of small, but here is the area that we're talking about. These improvements have already been constructed as part of a different project. And then traffic mitigation 3 was to design and construct US 101 freeway northbound off-ramp at Las Posas to encompass 2 left turn lanes and a dedicated right turn lane. And as we can see here, this also has been accomplished. 2 left turn lanes and a dedicated right turn lane. Traffic mitigation 4, coordinate and design construction of project improvements in line with capital improvement project ST0102, which is the Springville interchange. The developer was supposed to dedicate all land necessary for the construction of the interchange. And as we can see here, this too has been constructed. This is Springville Road, and all of this land was required for dedication for the Springville interchange. And then traffic mitigation 5 was merely to improve the roadway from what was then just the roadway somewhat was ended here, or was just a 2-lane roadway from Home Depot, and this had to be built out to full width master facility to the Springville interchange. That has been done. Traffic mitigation 6, construct the west, actually, this was already covered by Michael. It's this portion of the roadway from Springville to what was Bajo Agua Avenue, which is now West Ventura Boulevard. This has been constructed. And then traffic mitigation 7 was to improve a daily drive with markings and signage to help direct traffic, making a left turn on westbound Daily Drive onto southbound Las Posas Road. This too was constructed as a capital improvement project. Which brings us to the final traffic condition, which was the developer was to pay traffic impact mitigation fees, but in reality, the city already collects this fee, so this impact isn't necessary anymore either. So really, the only traffic impact that needs to be adhered to is traffic impact 1.
Could you repeat that last part for a minute?
The only remaining traffic impact left for the entitlement of this parcel is traffic impact 1.
Okay. Thank you.
Traffic impact 1? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go back to it. So developer will pay the traffic mitigation fee, and that money can be used for the implementation of an additional northbound lane over the US 101 freeway if deemed necessary.
Okay.
Back to Jackie.
Thank you.
So that traffic mitigation number 1 is a condition of approval on this project. And the reason why I asked Jason to highlight this is because the mitigated negative declaration for the Paseo Camino Real project had these 8 mitigation measures. And that was at a time when we did analyze traffic based on level of service. We no longer do that, as you know, and that we now use VMTs as the metric for evaluating transportation impacts. And so now these mitigation measures no longer apply, but we wanted to highlight that they didn't just go away and vanish, but they actually have been satisfied through either other projects have completed these improvements. There's a requirement for them to pay the fees through ordinance, which is still covered through our conditions of approval. So I just wanted to be able to highlight that these traffic mitigations on the mitigated negative declaration have either been fulfilled or will be through the payment of fees. So just in conclusion of staff's presentation. Good. Oh. Okay, so there we are. Okay. So staff has reviewed the proposed project and finds it to be consistent with the applicable goals and policies of the city's general plan, the Airport North specific plan, and the zoning ordinance. The project is also consistent with the city's economic development strategic plan, which was adopted to foster growth in the Camarillo economy. Staff receives retail leakage analysis reports, which tracks where residents spend their time and money outside of Camarillo. And Costco is a top store that residents leave Camarillo to shop. In the first quarter of 2023, residents of Camarillo made over 91,000 visits to the Oxnard Costco, over 21,000 visits to the Westlake Village Costco, and 9,000 visits to the Simi Valley Costco. The project has been reviewed by the Camarillo Airport and has been determined to be compatible with their airport operations. The airport compatibility land use plan is within the maximum building coverage of 50%, and the proposed building heights were reviewed by the Camarillo Airport, and they were determined to be within the allowable height limits under FAA and the aviation easement held by the County of Ventura. So with that, staff's recommendation is for the planning to adopt a resolution approving subsequent MND 2023-4, and in that to make a general motion adopting that subsequent MND with the mitigations as revised pertaining to air quality as discussed by Michael Brown, to include those specific recommendations from APCD. And second, staff's recommendation is for the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution approving CPD 226 modification number 5 and conditional use permit 422, subject to the recommended conditions of approval. And this concludes staff's report. We're available for questions.
Okay. Questions for staff?
I have no questions.
No questions?
I have a question for Michael Brown, I believe. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned the 3 letters that came in a little bit late. I think we saw those for the first time today, the Ventura County RMA, Environmental Health, and Flood Control, Watershed Protection District. So you mentioned, I think you mentioned that those would be taken care of somehow before the final document. Would those be through letter responses from the city to the county satisfaction, or how would that work?
We can do that if that's the city's request here. The main issues that were identified were modifying some of the air quality mitigation measures. And like I say, we're in agreement to that. So we can submit a response letter to the APCD there saying how we're doing it and stuff, but then the actual revised measures incorporated into the final document.
Okay, because it seemed like there was enough in there to where a response letter was warranted.
So technically, with a mitigated negative declaration, you are not legally required to submit responses, but we can out of, cooperation with
Right.
the county. So we could certainly do that.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know how that worked between city and county. And then the RMA had comments in there that would seem to lead to the need to simply add their comments as conditions of approval. So they did approve of it, but they had a number of items in there that the food service, for instance, the applicant food facility operator must submit plans to environmental health. It seemed like every comment from Resource Management Agency could be handled with a condition of approval. I don't know if that was the intent to go ahead and do that.
Perhaps Jackie would be better answering that.
Those comments all pertain to regulatory requirements they're required to comply with. And when they do submit through plan check for getting the proper permits, they would have to comply with all those requirements from the county when they submit to them.
Okay, that'll be part of the city review and approval process
Yes.
to make sure that the county concerns are, okay. All right. That's it, and then one for traffic.
Yes, Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, and again, thank you for your presentation. On that TRA1, which was the fees for the city possibly adding a lane over Las Posas, if I understood that. Las Posas over the freeway, or is that correct?
Yes, there was a condition to add an additional northbound lane over here we go, over the 101, over Las Posas Road, going over the 101 freeway.
Right, and I think that you said, the last thing you said was if deemed necessary.
Yes.
So who would deem that necessary or not? And when would that be?
That would be done via a traffic study, and we can definitely do that probably with the next entitlement, or when the rest of this parcel is, or projects are proposed.
Okay, that's right, because this is only half of the site, and the remainder will also generate more traffic studies, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have a question for Michael also. I know that in your literature, there was a finding that the addition of the gas stations on this project versus prior ones was not considered new information of substantial importance. Could you just kind of walk me through the analysis of what you do to come up with that conclusion?
Where excuse me, that we're saying that it's not substantial?
That would require an environmental impact report.
So with an EIR, in this case where we have a previously certified document, going through the updated analysis, if we were to identify new impacts that would be significant and unavoidable, meaning that we could not mitigate those to a less than significant level, then we would have to prepare a subsequent EIR to the previously certified documents here. But because we are able to mitigate the potential impacts to less than significant levels, then we can stick with the mitigated negative declaration process.
Okay. Thank you.
Nothing? Okay. Go ahead. No, I think most of mine will be for the applicant. So did you have some questions
I
for
do,
staff?
yeah. Thank you. I want to thank the city staff first for all of the time and resources and planning that they've done for this project. It's been significant over a number of years. And, just based on my time on the commission, I trust that the staff is very diligent and, are really invested in promoting the well-being of our community. So just want to thank you for all of your work and for the reports that we just received. And I want to go over some questions and I'll make some comments and would appreciate responses based on just my own assessment and also responding to some of the public comments that we have received. It just, there's been so much interest from the public and some concerns and spectrum of opinion support as well, which has been very valuable. And so one, because there are so many issues that are included in the comments and it's a complex project, I want to clarify first the issue that's before the commission and just get the staff's confirmation, again, for the benefit of the public, that, what is really before us right now. So one, just as a legal matter, because we received comments on the the 3 environmental reviews that were done, and just to confirm that because the time limitations to challenge those have expired, those have already they've been approved, and we're not reopening those. Those have already been deemed to be compliant with law, and is that correct? Just to pause there.
That is correct.
Okay, and so what's before the commission is whether the second subsequent mitigated negative declaration complies with CEQA based on Costco's application.
Yes.
Right, okay, so that's the scope of what we're determining today. Going back to the threshold question on the determination to proceed with the second subsequent MND rather than an EIR, I appreciated the various components that were described in the presentation by Michael, because the Costco proposal, with the mega fuel station, it's a very unique type of sort of like supercenter. And the proposed changes, are material and significant and really changes the scope and nature of what's been previously assessed. And there were, it's the fuel facility with the tanks, the parking lot, the tire center with the 5 installation bays, the pharmacy. And so there's been a conclusion that the mitigation measures bring the identified impacts below a level of significance, but I feel like there are gaps in the analysis that doesn't really allow for that substantiated conclusion that the impacts can be reduced to insignificant. So, and particularly in light of like the components that were addressed in the presentation versus what's in the actual MND. Who would like to comment on that?
Is there a question or just a?
Yeah, well, it's how that's substantiated based on the additional components of the project that were addressed in the proposal, in the report that we just received, but are not addressed in the actual MND itself.
I might want to ask our consultant to take that.
The additional information that was provided to you tonight during the presentation here was hopefully, it was intended to maybe fill some gaps that you feel might have been in the document. And in providing the presentation and giving that information, it is included in the record for the project, and therefore can be utilized in your decision as to whether or not the analysis meets your standard for adequacy there, because under CEQA it's the whole record, not only necessarily what's in the written document, which can be updated in the final document to include that additional information, but if you have that information presented before you to help you make that decision, then it is part of the record and can be considered.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was my understanding that that information needs to be in the document, particularly because it's an informational document for the public, so that they have the benefit of understanding the components of the project, so like the full project description, the impacts that were identified, and then possible mitigation measures. And so it's not, are you saying that you can like supplement the document with the report that you just provided?
Yes, that's correct. An environmental document, when it's submitted for first review, as for the public as a draft document, is not a final document. It's not intended to be perfect. It's intended to provide information, and then it can be revised and updated based on comments that have been received by the public or from a decision-making body such as yourself. So the question really is, can we provide the answers for you so that you feel that you can make your informed decision? And that doesn't necessarily have to be in the draft written document. It can be presented to you orally prior to approval of the document and a project.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. So just to go over some of the issues that were also presented by the letter received today by the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. The letter by the Environmental Health Director of the county. They identify as to hazardous materials and waste. They identify the fuel station as well as the pharmacy, and then the underground tank, storage tanks. But as I read the document, I haven't seen any analysis of those three components of the project. under the hazardous waste section. Is that right?
We certainly, in the document, it talks about how, for example, hazardous materials generated at the site, that would be transported, stored, and used at the site would have to comply with local regulations. We don't go into specifics like, for the pharmacy and things like that. That isn't necessarily a direct impact on the environment, for example. But so we don't specify each individual action. We looked at the project as a whole in this sense. And in this case, those sorts of issues are addressed by existing regulations.
Okay, but there isn't an analysis on the fuel center. It wasn't considered in reviewing like hazardous materials, for example, nor the tire center. And in terms of water quality, the runoff from the fuel station also was not included in the assessment, correct?
It was not in the written document, and that's why both for that as well as for the tire facility and hazards associated with the fuel facility, that's why we provided the additional information for you during our presentation.
Okay, but there wasn't, they were identified but not assessed, for the impacts and included in possible mitigation, and including the underground tanks that hold a capacity of 120 gallons, that was also not included in the water quality assessment, is that right?
Once again, not specifically, because, once again, it has to comply with the regulations.
And then for air quality, we received a number of public comments on those as well, and particularly on, I understand the reasoning that you explained of the presumption that there will be a cumulative significant impact based on the noncompliance status of the district. And the Air Pollution Control District's letter included a statement that really stood out to me. It says, they provide a number of mitigation measures, and two things that they state. It says that we should first include mitigation measures before deciding on the contribution to the account. I'm forgetting what it's called.
The TDM fund.
Thank you. Yeah, to the fund. And I feel like there's, the list of mitigation measures sound like just common sense to me and are great, including increasing EV parking stalls, solar panels on the buildings, and then even reducing the number of the fuel pumps. And so I think those haven't been evaluated, and the county is saying, these should be included and evaluated before the determination on the fund. But what most stood out at me of the letter is that it says reducing emissions from energy or energy emissions may be negligible and not enough to bring emissions down to less than significant. So that reminded me of one of the arguments made in the comments that we received from SAFER, which they have a full argument on because there isn't enough of an analysis and a substantiated conclusion about the mitigation measures, bringing it down to less than significance, that it behooves an EIR. So can you address those 2 points from the district and SAFER?
So with regards to the recommendations of the district, the reason that they're recommending that we look at those additional mitigation strategies there prior to the development of the TDM fund is because if you implement those, you reduce the emissions, and therefore you reduce the TDM fund contribution requirement. So that's what it would accomplish. It would be a lower fee for that. And as they say, most of the strategies that they have there for operational emissions would result in negligible reductions. And certainly, the one thing, at least, we would not at this time put in as mitigation is reducing the number of pumps. That's for you to decide. We're evaluating the impact of the project as proposed. But for other strategies, things like having a carpool program for employees, the employees are a small number of the people there. So if you do a program for them, you're going to maybe reduce 10% of their trips, very small. Bicycle things, once again, very small. So yes, these things would have small amounts. So the program that's been implemented throughout the county and by the city for more than 2 decades is the contribution to the TDM fund, which is done throughout the county as to provide programs to reduce regional emissions. This was a program developed by and recommended by the APCD and implemented by the cities and the county to reduce the emissions. So yes, under these recommendations, it can be determined that the implementation of these programs would reduce the impacts to a less than significant level, and therefore an EIR is not required because you do not have to override an unavoidable significant impact.
Okay, thank you. So reducing the number of fuel pumps is within the discretion of the commission, and in an EIR that also may be considered as an alternative, right? Yeah, I think that the mitigation measures that are recommended would be appreciated by the employees, and also are consistent with like the climate plan that the city has been developing, and really add benefits to the community as a whole, including the solar panels to the building, and bring us up to speed to where we need to be. And in terms of the cumulative impacts, there was at least one comment about cumulative impacts having not been studied based on the known airport expansion. And I think that's important, particularly for the people who live around the airport, to understand, what the cumulative impacts are of emissions, and then there is an assumption, or a baseline position that there will be, that this project in itself will add cumulative impacts, but without knowing how much more, like having some quantification. Again, it undermines our ability to understand what mitigation measures, are necessary. And in terms of cumulative impacts, there wasn't an analysis on carbon monoxide or toxic air contaminants or fugitive dust cumulative impacts. So I'm just concerned about the lack of information provided to the community, and not having sufficient information and analysis, to make those determinations, particularly as to mitigation.
Is there a question?
It's just a comment, and
Okay.
I'd love to hear your response if you have one.
Well, the analysis of air quality impacts was evaluated based on the methodologies and recommendations of the Air Pollution Control District. And once again, it is their recommendation. They do not have methodologies and thresholds for the emissions generated by related projects. So they have their threshold of significance that's applied to individual development projects. And if your project generates more than that, then it is considered to be a cumulative, the contribution of the project to cumulative impacts is considered to be considerable under CEQA. And therefore, mitigation is required. And so mitigation has been identified. So you mitigate the impact of the project. It's the thresholds do not apply to the emissions generated by multiple projects. So therefore, it's not this project's responsibility to mitigate the impacts of other development projects, such as at the airport or other areas of Camarillo here. With regards to fugitive dust impacts here, the concern of the Air District is with regards to the dust generated during construction through earth movement here. And so they do not have quantified thresholds for that. Instead, individual projects are required to implement dust control programs, as this project would have to do. Doing that mitigates that project's impacts to a less than significant level. With regards to carbon monoxide hotspots there, that used to be an issue back when the county was a non-attainment area for carbon monoxide. Now it's in attainment. In order to have a localized carbon monoxide hotspot now, you would have to have an intersection operating at level of service F with about 40,000 vehicle trips per hour. So basically, the district no longer recommends that we look at those. We talk about that and things now, but in the document, we talk about carbon monoxide hotspots, but the cumulative impacts of the other projects would not cause those localized impacts. That is a localized issue of concern rather than a regional issue of concern.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the reason you would look at past this current project and then foreseeable impacts of other projects is to know what the baseline is and then know what this project's additional impacts are. So you mitigate those,
Well,
just this project's, not that we're not taking care of other projects,
Right.
but this project, so.
The baseline under CEQA is the existing condition.
Existing, yeah, but to understand the full scope of considerable impacts, that CEQA requires looking at future known and foreseeable projects as well. Yeah, I think there are just some gaps. There's so much room for improvement for this project that would provide benefits to the community in enjoying this new project. Both the fuel station and the store. And I'm concerned about just like the lack of analysis and sort of assumptions that are going into it, even just like on fugitive dust and emissions. Again, given the excavation for 4 very big underground storage tanks, that's a significant project in and of itself. So I understand that with all projects, there's compliance required with permits, and existing law and regulations, but that's not an answer, to, why we don't do analysis, right? I mean, that's just inherent in any project, is that there will be compliance with existing law.
Well, with regards to fugitive dust, we did do the analysis.
Oh, I didn't see anything
It's
in
not
there about,
It's not quantified. It's not required to be quantified, but it is discussed qualitatively, as recommended by the Air District.
including the fuel station and the
It's-
tanks.
It's part of the overall grading and excavation of the project site.
Okay, I don't see that
We
in
don't
there.
specify, we don't break that out separately because they're going to occur at similar times there. So we talk about the movement of earth and the generation of dust associated with construction of the proposed project,
Okay,
which includes the fuel station.
thanks. I appreciate your time and patience with all of my questions and comments.
Okay, and you did remind me, I did have one question that might be better for staff, if I can get somebody from Public Works to maybe address the water runoff system? Do we have? Because what I was doing was I read through, and it seemed like that there's a plan, or the way that it's set up is that the water runoff, including anything from the gas station area and such, would be going through a kind of a system of some filters and different things before it gets to like a holding area or something like that. But could you explain how the runoff water will be filtered out or cleaned or sanitized, whatever, before it gets to a holding area?
Sure. Yes, thank you, Chair Vandermeulen. So kind of as was mentioned previously, as part of part of the application process, we do review the PCS MP, and that identifies the different treatment systems for all the stormwater runoff. So as you had mentioned, we review it conceptually and then get into the more technical details as we move along, but we actually have a pretty thorough process early on because of the importance of it. So as you mentioned, as proposed, the conceptual plan does have a multi-layer treatment system. So there is a specific treatment for the fuel system that goes through, and then actually a secondary treatment system, and then actually a third treatment system, kind of larger detention basin, underground detention system that it runs through. And that's within the conditions that it essentially is designed to meet that conceptually approved PCS MP.
Okay. I know I read it and it made sense, but I also know we've had some questions come in, as far as the water runoff and dangers in that or something. So I wanted, to kind of make sure we covered that and what was planned and how it worked. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it, again, as the state requires a very thorough process for on-site stormwater runoff, so that any stormwater leaving the site will go through this treatment system and meet all those thorough state requirements as well as the cities.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, then we can open public comments, and I would like to start with the applicant.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Planning Commissioners, and City staff. My name is Diana Salazar. I am a Director of Real Estate Development for Costco. Our address is 9 Corporate Park in Irvine, California. First, I would like to thank the city staff for working with us so closely this past year and in determining the best possible design and conditions of approval for our project. Costco is very excited to come to Camarillo. This location lets us provide a much-needed base between our existing Oxnard warehouse, located 5.7 miles north of the proposed site, and the Westlake Village warehouse, located 19 miles southeast of the site. Based on our membership data, 70% of the total households in the city of Camarillo already have a membership with us. The new warehouse and gas station in Camarillo will reduce the mileage and emissions from these members already making the trips to the Oxnard warehouse and keep the tax revenue from those members in the city. I would like to clarify that Oxnard will remain open. The company has no plans to close Oxnard. To highlight a few of the benefits we will bring to the community, this new warehouse will provide 250 new jobs. We offer the highest wages and best benefits in the retail industry. Our employee turnover rate is close to 1/5 the national average. Our history is filled with examples of employees growing from entry level to invest in this community, providing support for local schools and other community programs. In 2022, Costco invested $65 million in charitable contributions across the U.S. Increased sales tax revenue for the city. Costco ranks among the highest tax generators in retail centers across America. Costco is committed to best practices. In 2020, we rolled out the Sustainable Technical Assistance Review Program, which goes by the acronym STAR. And STAR enables us to monitor our day-to-day operations to ensure environmental compliance, including our water usage, our waste management, energy consumption, and carbon emissions. STAR provides for documentation, transparency, and accountability. Additionally, we work closely with our suppliers and contractors to ensure that they also hold the same level of best practices. Finally, Costco is committed to operate 80% on clean, renewable energy by 2030. I will invite you to read more about our environmental initiatives. Our climate action plan is posted in our website. Thank you for your attention. I will now hand it over to our architect and team of experts. Following their presentations, we will remain to answer any questions. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Steve Orozco here, MG2, Costco's architect. So Costco's prototypical design has been modified to meet the intent of the City of Camarillo's requirements. The proposed design meets the requirements of the Mission Early California-style architecture, using a long entry colonnade, slope roof at the main entry, hip roof towers, and materials that include clay roof tiles, textured exterior walls, and earth tones of brown and red color palettes. The design minimizes the visual impacts of large retail warehouses through a mix of building materials, color breaks, varying parapet heights, trellises, and landscape. The long elevations are visually shortened by incorporating these design elements both horizontally and vertically. A pedestrian-friendly scale is achieved by incorporating multiple trellises, an entry arcade, a color and material breaks at the base of the building. The mission-style building entrance will create a visual focal point to the warehouse with architectural design, materials, color schemes, and details blended together to give this location a look and feel specific context to the Heritage Zone and the Airport North specific plan. Costco prides itself in sustainable practices. To decrease the carbon footprint of shipping, all new warehouses use local materials. Installation for new warehouses utilize 50% recycled materials while maintaining good thermal performance and lowering energy consumption. Furthermore, all new warehouses employ pre-engineered structural steel systems, and metal panel skins are constructed of 80% recycled steel, reducing the amount of materials used. For site designs, new warehouses utilize 100% LED technology and incorporate a drip irrigation into the landscaping to reduce water loss. Thank you very much, and if you should have any questions, I'll be here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chris Verka. I'm with Barghausen Consulting Engineers out of Kent, Washington, and we are Costco's fuel station consultant. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes just going over some of the basic features of the Costco gasoline program. On the slide here, there's some bullet points, but basically, the Costco Fuel Center is predicated on efficiency and being simple. For example, there are no cash registers. There's no cash payments accepted. It's all the transactions occur via electronic transactions directly at the pump. Costco gas stations don't sell anything else other than fuel. No other merchandise is sold there. The facility is also designed for efficient circulation, meaning one-way traffic flow, plenty of room for queued vehicles, and also some passing lanes that allow cars to be able to get into fueling positions easily. And just to show kind of what Costco does to help with the efficiency of the operation, they use this red light, green light system, which is a small sign that is on the canopy column that basically lights up green or red depending on if somebody's in a fueling position. So when you're sitting in line and there's a car in front of you, you can't really see what's open in front of that car. And so they utilize this little sign, and you can kind of see it there on the picture. It's kind of small. But the green would signify an open fueling position, and the red would say that that fueling position is occupied. And so it allows somebody to be able to see that there's an open position, and then they can drive around and get into the to the open position. One other comment is that the tank delivery zone is intentionally separate from the queuing area and from the sales operation, just to keep those two activities completely separate and safe. In terms of operations, Costco provides full-time attendance at every one of their gas stations. And their job is simply to be on their feet, walking around, helping members, inspecting hoses, making sure that the operation's operating as efficiently as possible. Since there is no other retail function at the station, their job is just to make sure that the dispensing operation is safe and efficient. And then, as you might imagine, Costco uses state-of-the-art equipment for their underground storage tanks and piping and everything else that goes into the fuel center. That is part of Costco's philosophy overall, and it's also based on regulatory standards, which are robust. And our company has worked throughout the United States on gas stations, and there's no question that California has the most robust standards for gas station construction in the United States. The standards are very high, and Costco's fuel stations meet and sometimes exceed those standards. And there's a list of some of the state-of-the-art equipment that the facility uses. Double-walled tanks that are made of fiberglass, which is non-corrosive. Electronic monitoring systems, 24-hour security systems, dripless nozzles, vapor recovery systems, automatic shutoffs, dispenser and fill sumps, and even focused lighting to make sure that at night when fueling's going on, that it's safe. And then finally, in regards to the fuel that they sell, and this is pretty quick, but Costco provides an additive in the fuel that they sell. It's Kirkland Signature additive, and it's basically a detergent that keeps your engine clean, and it helps with the fuel efficiency and does help reduce emissions as well. And so that kind of concludes my comments, but I just wanted to say that, basically from site design, to the day-to-day operation, to the equipment they use, to the fuel they sell, Costco, is careful and advanced with all of that and really operates a state-of-the-art facility. One I think they're proud to say is, best in class. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Christine Connolly with Kittleson and Associates, Costco's traffic engineer for this project. We knew there would probably be some questions about queues at the fuel station, so we wanted to try and answer some of those questions for you in advance. In designing the site, there was a lot of careful thought and consideration to the potential for fuel facility queues. At any Costco site, we're learning from the experience at other sites. So this fuel facility was designed with 32 positions, primarily for the purpose of reducing queues and idling for vehicles or for customers using the facility. The number of pumps at the facility doesn't have a direct influence on the number of members or their general consumption of gas on a day-to-day basis. With this facility in particular, it's going to help shorten some of the trips, the vehicular trips, for many of the customers who will use the facility. So in this diagram, it's showing a summary of some studies that we've conducted at other existing Costco fuel facilities in California. All of the studies that we looked at have 30 to 32 fueling positions as well, so very similar to the proposed site. In teal is represented the average maximum queue that we observed at the sites that are similar to this one in California. That's about 28 vehicles, which all fit within the fuel pad. If we conservatively plan the site to accommodate the maximum that we've observed at any of the sites that we studied, that would be, it's hard to see on the screen right here, but that would be the vehicles in kind of a hollow vehicle with a teal outline, so the white vehicles that kind of fade away in the middle there, yeah. And then, as you can see on this plan, there's 17 additional vehicles shown in gray that are not anticipated based on our studies at other sites, but could be accommodated on the site in the event of a holiday surge in demand or any other unexpected surges in demand for gas. And that queue would be accommodated within a special striped storage lane, so it wouldn't interfere with the operations of the site. And so you could maintain two-way traffic in that aisle along the northern boundary of the site, even if there's a queue for the fuel facility. And that prevents back out into the shared access aisle with the future shopping center to the west. The fuel facility has also been placed on the northern portion of the site, and that in part, or in a good part, was to increase the distance from the fuel facility to Ventura Boulevard and thus prevent backing out onto the public street system as well. Okay, as Chris mentioned just before me, the fuel facility, every Costco fuel facility has an attendant, and the job of that attendant is to help customers maneuver within the site to try and utilize the available space as best and most efficiently as possible. And then also, they kind of judge when this queue management plan might be necessary and make the appropriate changes on site to implement the plan. And then, of course, there's the red light, green light system, which also helps move the customers a little quicker through. And all of these help to reduce queues and emissions associated with vehicle idling at the gas station. One other concern that's been raised by the public is congestion, especially at the busy intersection of Las Posas Road and Ventura Boulevard. Yes. The traffic study that was conducted for the original approved project, it assumed development of the city under the general plan, so basically full build-out of development within the area. Subsequent studies that have been prepared since that analysis have also included trips from this development, but also, or also full development of the city's general plan. And so they've accounted for the cumulative traffic conditions within the area and at some of the intersections that the neighbors have noted are of concern to them. And all of the intersections are operating at level of service C or better in all of these studies under future conditions. The current plan for the site, we worked with the city to develop technical studies that estimated trip generation and VMT, and we showed that both the trips for the site and the VMT fall within the envelope that would have been generated by the original project, and thus there's a less than significant impact in traffic or to traffic. And when the remainder, the future development of the west portion of the site, the rest of the shopping center occurs, they will need to also show that they fall within that trip envelope that was studied in the original traffic analysis. Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Commissioners. My name is Dale Goldsmith. I'm with AGD. We are Land Use and CEQA Counsel to Costco. As Mr. Brown stated, the city prepared a second subsequent MND for the project, circulated it for a period of 20 days, and received 12 comments. The city provided comprehensive written responses, which are in your staff report. I would like to briefly address a couple of those comments that were received during the comment period. First pertains to air quality. Concerns were expressed regarding emissions from idling vehicles during Costco operations. The second subsequent mitigated negative declaration and its extensive expert technical reports evaluated the project's potential air quality impacts in accordance with the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District's guidelines. The analysis expressly included emissions from the idling of both passenger vehicles and trucks at the proposed Costco and the gas station. The analysis shows that the project's regional air quality impacts will be less than significant with mitigation measures. These measures are approved mitigation measures for the control of operational emissions as dictated by the Air Pollution Control District. And I'd like to reiterate, as Mr. Brown said, that the the methodology of the Air Pollution Control District is to have a single threshold for both project-specific impacts and cumulative impacts. And this is very common. Many air districts around the state do this because it's really the regional emissions that are primarily concerned. And therefore, emissions aren't added up, but rather if a project is below the threshold with mitigation, the cumulative as well as project-specific impacts would be less than significant. And with mitigation, this project's impacts would be less than significant, therefore there are no cumulative impacts. The mitigation measures identified in the second subsequent MND have been shown to reduce the impacts with regard to air quality to less than significant. Therefore, no further mitigation is required. Having said this, the Air Pollution Control District recommended a adjustment or modification to AQ2, mitigation measure AQ2, to require Tier 3 and Tier 4 equipment. Costco is fine with that. We would use that equipment anyway, and we think that reflects existing practice and best construction practices. And I'd like to also reiterate that the vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, of this project is much less than the original project analyzed in the prior CEQA documents. And why is this important? It's important because vehicle miles traveled drives both mobile air quality emissions, but also importantly, greenhouse gas emissions. So the reduction in VMT not only having a traffic impact under the current methodology, it also has benefits with regard to operational emissions, mobile emissions, and also greenhouse gas emissions. In addition to the regional air quality analysis, the subsequent MND included a human health risk assessment, or HRA, and that assessed the potential emissions from toxic air contaminants from the project, including diesel particulate matter from the idling of project trucks and fugitive emissions from the gasoline operations, pumping and likewise, and dispensing. And those impacts were assessed on residents as well as workers in the vicinity. The HRA shows that impacts with regard to toxic air contaminants associated with the project would be less than significant. Again, that's based on the methodology and thresholds of the Air Pollution Control District. Another comment expressed concerns that the project would result in significant impacts to birds. The second subsequent MND found that the project would not significantly impact biological resources, including birds, primarily because of the vegetation on the site, which is really quite sparse. I'm sorry, let me just, I have a, sorry, I'm not very technologically up to speed on this. As you can see, it's a very sparse site. There's not a lot of lush vegetation. There's not a lot of opportunities for flora or fauna there. And because of that vegetation of non-native grasses, it doesn't present good habitat. In addition, the vegetation is controlled on a regular basis by goats who are brought in to graze it and keep the grass down. So as a result, it's not a good habitat, and also it's surrounded by urban uses, so therefore it's not a wildlife corridor. There was only one special status species that was determined to be potentially in the area, and that's the burrowing owl. And there was a mitigation and condition of approval that was imposed to address the burrowing owl. Well, several common bird species may use the site from time to time for foraging. These common species are not listed on the federal or state Endangered Species Act or considered to be special species warranting protection. Therefore, the loss of foraging habit for these common birds is not a significant environmental impact under CEQA. However, native nesting birds are protected under the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act, or MBTA. To implement the MBTA, the city has composed a condition of approval requiring a pre-construction survey by a qualified biologist at least 1 week prior to any construction activity during the nesting season. If the survey discloses active nests, the biologist will establish a buffer that must be maintained until the biologist determines that the nest is no longer being used by either young birds or adult birds. With compliance with the federal act, the MBTA, and this condition, the project impacts to birds and other species will be less than significant. An updated biological resources assessment dated May 2022, also included in the staff report, confirms this conclusion. I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
I have one for the architect. The height of your building, proposed building, are you aware of the height of the previously proposed buildings from the previous shopping centers and how it compares? Maybe that's better for our staff. I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot.
I can have Jackie answer that.
Jackie, it's my understanding that this is considerably shorter than the towers and structures that were proposed in the previous buildings. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The large shopping center had some significantly taller tower elements that are way higher than this project.
So this is greatly reduced from what was going to be there before.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
it is significantly lower overall than the prior project.
Thank you. That was my question.
Commissioner, the top of cornice is actually at 32 feet, and so the height requirement's at 35, so the overall building's below the height requirement.
Okay, yes, I have a couple questions, if I can read my own notes here. One for Diana, I believe, and first question would be the timing of the project, with approval of the project, or from the point of approval, if that happens.
Yeah, so the plan, if we do get approval, would be to get a grading permit early next year and be open by late fall of 2024.
2024?
Was
Well-
that your question? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so you mentioned you'd go right into grading and you would actually have a facility up by fall of 2024?
That is correct.
That's fast.
Yes, we do it pretty fast, yes.
My second question has to do with what you mentioned, your clean renewable energy goals by the year 2030. Do those include solar energy? You have so much room to work with there, and I'm just wondering if that's included in your...
Yes, so we do own about 100 solar facilities, but we don't do it in every single project. We do have a full energy department within the company that basically analyzes where is logistically feasible to build, and we could get a return on the investment. In some jurisdictions, we've been able to do it. Some other ones we have not. So, but yeah, it is something that we're open to when it's feasible.
All right, so when you're looking at those goals, do you make a decision and that's it for that facility, or would you look at that on an annual basis, or?
We look at on location by location. That's correct.
All right.
Location by location.
Okay, so once you've decided not to do solar energy, it probably will not be a part of that facility at any point?
Yes, because then the retrofit becomes very expensive. Usually when we think there is a possibility that it will, it will benefit the project, we do design the structure to support future solar panels. Yes. But I mean, part of the strategy of us becoming, 80% reliable on clean energy is the fact that we would have other sources to purchase that clean energy, besides not necessarily us having to generate it, but supporting clean energy and basically supply, like purchasing from suppliers that are already applying and using clean energy. So that's, I think that will be the goal too.
Okay, understood. And then I have a question for, is it Christine, traffic engineer? Thank you. So you mentioned that an LOS study has been done for the proposed Costco facility. Is that correct? Did I go? Yep.
So the approved project prepared a level of service study. That was the standard at the time. And so what we did was compare the trips that are going to be generated by both the Costco and the future development of the remaining shopping center to the trips that were analyzed in that study, and found that the trip generation was lower. I believe our study identified a slight increase in AM peak hour trips, and so we looked at what impact that might have on the level of service at the intersections during the AM peak, and all would still remain within the level of service C standard that the city has.
Okay, and that includes Las Posas, Ventura
Yes.
Boulevard. And does that include the additional lane that we talked about a little bit earlier for Las Posas Road?
It does not include, I would have to check, is that traffic condition 1?
Yes.
I need to check on that, but it does include the other mitigations.
All right, I mean, because if
That happened.
if it does not include that additional lane, then the additional lane obviously would make it even better.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
But if it does include that lane, then the level of service would be of a lesser quality at that intersection.
Well, it would be the acceptable level of service C that has been analyzed in the study for this project, but also any study that has been prepared in the area since that time has included traffic from the development, and it's still showing a level of service C.
In the current configuration, in the current lane arrangements for Las Posas Road over the freeway, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Oh, one more. Not for traffic. For the burrowing owl mitigation. I just wanted to confirm with city staff that the condition of approval that was mentioned is in the conditions of approval.
Yes, it is in the conditions of approval. I don't have that number for you, but it's towards the end of the section under general conditions.
On general, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I have some questions. I'll try to be brief because I know it's getting late and there are members of the public who want to comment and we want to hear from them. The question was raised earlier whether the tire center would also have batteries. I don't know who can answer that.
Yes, they do sell batteries.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll also just say I appreciate the presentation, and I am within the 70% of card holders, of members, and very much appreciate the policies on wages and benefits. I think will greatly benefit our community. I'm wondering whether you've had an opportunity to look at the list of proposed mitigation measures by the Air District, and whether you have any objections to any of them.
Just had preliminary thoughts, and I'd like to maybe, as the public comments, just double-check this. But most of them seem to be consistent with what Costco's been doing. And again, there's no need for mitigation measures because impacts are less than significant, so there's no legal nexus to require it. But for the interest of discussion, Costco would have a concern about compressed work schedules. That doesn't really work for a retail facility. If you have an office, that might make a difference because you avoid the peaks. But because Costco's operations go outside the peaks, many of the employees arrive before the peak hour period or leave before or leave after. So that doesn't make any sense. And also reducing the number of fuel pumps actually would be counterproductive because Costco's studies have shown that when there's more pumps, it's more efficient. If there's fewer pumps, the queues are longer. When people are queuing, they're idling, and there's more emissions. So we think that would be incredibly counterproductive. And again, because impacts are less than significant, we don't see any reason for it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I thought that the conclusion was that the impacts would be significant and based on,
Less than significant with mitigation.
with the mitigation, so the mitigation is necessary.
The mitigation that's already in the MND, so there's no additional mitigation required.
I understand your position. Okay. What about the hiring locally? Is that something, is that a practice that you already have? Great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and the solar panels, I understand that it would be, maybe too deep of a cost to include them, to retrofit the building, so doing it upfront is much more cost efficient. And we have a lot of sun in Camarillo, a lot of sunny days here that we enjoy. That's all I have for the applicant for now. Thank you.
Do you have anything? Okay. Let me see. For Christina on the traffic. So would it be fair to say that when I look at Oxnard with the 24 pumps or 24 car allowances, and they get way backed up on a lot of the times when I drive by, and they're through the backup area and around and even almost out to the street. So would you say that if they had 32 pumps, that the majority of that backup area, other than right behind the pumps, would not be utilized?
I can't speak to the Oxnard queue lengths in particular, but we collect traffic counts and queue tallies essentially at facilities of varying sizes. So we have data at 12 positions, at 24, at 32, and it shows a pretty significant reduction in queues with each increase in pumps.
Okay.
Yeah, so having 32 does reduce the queues compared to a 24 position fuel station.
Because I know you were only showing it like just directly behind the pumps on your drawing here, on your drawing of the parking and.
Yes, so I believe the queue storage distance at this facility is it like, Steve was telling me earlier, is it like 20 feet longer than the Oxnard queue storage?
Yeah, so the Oxnard location, the queue lengths are about 115 to 120, whereas this one is, I think, what was it at?
You said 133.
Yeah, 133, and we have, this is a 4x4 compared to Oxnard is a 4x3, so 4 across, 3 deep, and so.
Okay.
Yeah, so not only are there more pumps to more quickly and efficiently process the demand, but also there's some additional queue storage in the actual fuel pad compared to Oxnard. And then the other benefit I would say here is it's further from the public street. So there's going to be less blockage of people who are trying to do other things besides get gas.
Right. Okay, thank you. For the architect? Would you go into a little bit more detail on like the exterior walls and the insulation, the materials that are used in the insulation that you're hoping that will bring the energy costs down to the use of the building?
Yeah, so we use a metal building supplier for the vertical panels, and so the specific, so as you can see, let me see, does this have a pointer? So the beige area are going to be vertical panels, and then essentially what it does is we'll layer them on there, and then kind of encapsulating the building to make them energy efficiency. The type of panel that we use is 80% a recycled material, so it basically increases the fuel, the energy efficiency of the building. And then let me see, this is really small. And then the stone that we're using throughout, we're not using a whole lot of stone in this area, so it's basically going to reduce the heat of the building, and so The roof that we're using for the building is reflective, so it reduces the heat of the overall building. And we have large fans throughout the warehouse that basically cools down the building, and then the doors of the building kind of basically cool down the building, so it's not running as hot, so you don't need the HVAC to run at all time as well.
Okay. Thank you. And who talked about the gas tanks? Which of you? Yeah. Couldn't remember. From what I've read, most of the newer gas tanks for several years have been double-walled. So why fiberglass rather than metal or rather than steel? And how will those be monitored for leaks?
Yeah, so the tank fiberglass is non-corrosive. So whereas steel used to, they would corrode. And so years ago, the government said you actually got to pull those tanks out of the ground and replace them with fiberglass. So fiberglass is also really rigid. It's a very strong material, very earthquake resistant, like the highest earthquake standard you have. That's what they're built to. And then in terms of the monitoring, because they're double walled, they have interstitial monitoring between the two walls of the tanks. And if there's any sort of change in that interstitial space, a sensor will detect that and will basically kind of set an alarm condition off at the station and shut everything down. And then Costco will be alerted to it and send a technician to the site to diagnose what the issue is.
Okay. Thank you. And let me see. I think that's all I had for the applicants. Okay, so then we can go to public comments, and several of you have submitted a speaking card. I will take those in the order that I have them, and you will have 3 minutes at the podium to speak, and it'll go off when, you'll get a buzzer when, I think, 30 seconds, when your time is almost over. So, thank you. First person, Joe, is it Heiler? Maybe Hyla. You can tell me the correct name.
It's Hilu.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. So again, my name is Joe Hilu, and my family owns and operates Hilu Chevron on the corner of Las Postas and Daly, right off the 101 freeway. Our family-owned gas station and convenience store has been serving this wonderful city for nearly 15 years. My father, who battled and succumbed to cancer, started the business, and my brother and I have been proudly managing it for the last dozen years on behalf of my mother and sisters. To those of you who have been loyal customers, we sincerely thank you for your patronage. As you may know, we take pride in keeping our prices low and providing the best value in town. Camarillo holds a special place in our hearts, and we believe in preserving its unique character, a character that sets us apart from neighboring cities like Oxnard. We've always operated under stringent rules to help maintain the city's appeal. I'll give you a few examples. One, the city has historically prohibited us from even displaying a Chevron logo on the top of our dispensers next to the pump number in order to preserve the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Number two, the city still prohibits us from displaying standard Chevron advertising at the fuel islands that are allowed in every other jurisdiction that I know of in order to preserve that same community aesthetic. And number three, the Ventura County APCD still limits our annual fuel volume to less than half of what is being allowed for the Costco. Approving this Costco with a gas station that is 2 to 4 times the size of any other gas station in the city would drastically alter the city's character. And as an existing business owner, it feels unfair to allow such a massive development without a new and comprehensive review, given the conditions under which we have operated for the last decade and a half in the city that we cherish so much. This approval would not only impact our family and our dedicated employees, but our community at large. We kindly urge you to consider the consequences to small businesses like ours and to protect the values that we as a community hold dear. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Richard Lucas III.
Good evening. My name is Richard Lucas III. I wanted to say thank you to Costco and all the speakers tonight. I thought it was very well prepared. As a 40-plus year resident of Camarillo, this is a major change to our city, and I think it is warranted, and I'm excited to welcome Costco to Camarillo. I've been a member of Costco for 21 years. I shop there with my wife and family weekly because I believe that Costco is a retail business that serves the public in the best interest and best practices. And I was very excited to hear that the Costco brand would come to Camarillo because their business has been pretty impacted at the Oxnard location since COVID. And several times I've spoke with the management, and they've brought on a tremendous amount of staff to deal with the increase of their consumers. And when I heard about the Camarillo store, I thought this is great because, one, it's going to bring sales tax revenue into our city, which for as long as I've lived here, the outlets have been wonderful to our town, and Costco will help augment that as well. So the other issue that I see is it will help our neighbors in Oxnard by taking those 70,000 customers and moving them into Camarillo, alleviating a lot of the congestion that is in Oxnard. So I would disagree with the idea of reducing the amount of pumps. I would actually argue that we would double what they're asking for, because as you move cars through faster, it's a more efficient process. And I saw that through the time of them moving their fuel station from near the freeway to where it is currently in Oxnard. I think with that aside, there are residents in Camarillo that are paying Melrose. It's one thing that the Springville overchange was being charged Melrose, and I think that a lot of the people that have spent tens of thousands of dollars for the repayment of those capital improvements would also appreciate a establishment to bring sales tax revenue into the city to benefit our town. So with that, I think I'll leave you, and I appreciate everything.
Thank you. Next is Kristen Kessler.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Excuse me, I have a cough. I usually don't sound like a frog. My name is Kristen, and I am familiar with the open fields on Springville Drive because I volunteer at the Camarillo Animal Shelter, and each week I drive by that field to get to the shelter. When I drive by, I'm always greeted by the sight of red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, and in the spring, red-winged blackbirds. Therefore, when I heard about this project, I became concerned as to the fate of these birds. My concern increased when I read the comment letter submitted by the Ventura Audubon Society and learned that burrowing owls have been spotted in the area. The owls are listed as a species of concern, which you know. I then read the Biological Resources Assessment Report, and I was alarmed to learn that the only mitigations recommended are to leave any active owl nests alone during construction and to remove all the trash from the area to mitigate predators. In the short term, there's nothing wrong with this approach, but in the long term, what is going to happen when these nests are paved over? These mitigations are woefully inadequate to protect a species that is threatened. It is important to preserve nature to the extent possible. Being able to view wildlife in an urban area gives us the chance to connect with nature, it decreases stress, and improves the quality of life. No matter what happens with this project, it is imperative that stronger mitigations, most importantly open space, be put in place to protect burrowing owls, raptors, and all bird species who rely in this area. Therefore, I ask that you please pause this project and require that a thorough and impartial EIR be conducted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let me see, make sure I. Next is Joan Hansel. Hasn't started yet.
All right, good, all right. Here's why we need an independent environmental impact report. Your report fails to address the impact this new Costco project would have on nearby residents just across the freeway. I live in Springville, so you can see why I'm concerned. There are about 1,200 apartments, townhomes, and single-family homes in that area. Now, though there may be two entrances to Costco, your report overlooks routes that one has to get there. What about Ponderosa? Will there be a lot of traffic traveling on Ponderosa? What about Earl Joseph? There'll be a lot of cars shooting down the Earl Joseph from the hills. Now, speaking of the gas station, that's the most distressing. There is no need for another gas station. One has recently been improved on Arneo Road, and another one is planned for Ralph's empty corner lot on Las Posas. No matter where you look, there's a gas station around here. You go down Daily Drive, and there's one after the other. All right, the area on the Costco site where 42 vehicles can, I guess you call it stacking, they're all pumping pollutants into the atmosphere. And right across the freeway, there's an apartment for low-income senior citizens. There's a big apartment building full of low-income senior citizens, and the pollutants are going to be driven right across the freeway. So, the residents who will be affected by the proposed project deserve to have an independent environmental impact report requiring a comprehensive study and analysis of impacts to traffic, air, existing businesses, and property values. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kathy Fry.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. I'll get right to the point. Please do not approve and adopt second subsequent MND 2023-4 in the associated CDP and CUP. This Costco development with gas stations, 32 pumps, should be considered a new project, and this project is ripe for an EIR and a fresh look. The original CEQA review for this was in 2006. The Dow Jones closed at 12,000. Bush was president and Schwarzenegger was governor. Where have we gone since then? Today, I think it closed at over 36,000, so that's a big difference. So we went from 2006 to 2011, another review, and another review in 2016 added on, and now 2023, soon to be 2024. We're looking at this. The original is 18 years old. Is this really adequate? 18 years to be looking at review and not opening that up again from 18 years ago. Instead of piecemealing this project, which I think it is piecemealed, please, let's take a fresh look. We need a new CEQA document, a new review, and most of all, adequate noticing to our developments, to our surrounding properties. This is where the project is proposed. I'm in Springville, and I measured, I'm 600 feet away across the freeway, and I do not remember receiving any review, any notice that this meeting was happening or for the MND review, except for these, which were not sent by the city. I received 2 of these on my front door. So I will probably be coming to the city to see if my address, I'm a homeowner, was included on there. And it is true that planners are legally bound to notice within 600 feet, but something as large as this development really needs a review for the whole Springville development and the whole surrounding area. If it touches that development, the whole development should be reviewed. So thank you once again. Please do not approve this project. It is not time for it, and I don't think it was adequately reviewed the way it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Lauren De La Torre.
I'm finally getting up here.
You are.
I am. Good evening. My name is Lauren De La Torre, and I have been a resident living on Oak Street in Old Town Camarillo since March 1988. Tonight, you are discussing the Costco project and the possibility of building it on Ventura Boulevard across from the Camarillo Airport. This project will contain 4 covered fueling bays, with each bay having 4 gas pumps to fuel 2 cars each. This results in 16 fueling dispensers that will be providing a fueling capacity of 32 cars at a time, while 42 cars will wait to get into the fueling station once one is empty. This huge gas station will be in competition with the current 112 fuel tanks at other gas stations around our town. They're located on streets around Las Posas, Carmen, and Arneal. In addition, there will be 16 new gas pumps at the corner of Las Posas Plaza and the Kmart redevelopment site. Do we really need 160 gas pumps in our town? How will the current gas stations deal, and we heard about this just a little while ago, how will the current gas stations in Camarillo deal with Costco and their new gas business? The Costco gas station will cause a large increase of vehicle congestion on Ventura Boulevard and at the Springville and Las Posas interchanges. The project developer will contribute a total of $667,502 to the TDM fund managed by the City of Camarillo. That's it? Are there going to be solar panels on the buildings or on top of the parking shade structure? How about charging stations for electric vehicles? Out of the 901 parking stalls, there will be 5% or 43 spots that are charging stations and 855 that are not for solar charging. Looking at Camarillo Airport emissions, the Costco parking and gas line, in addition to the often congested 101 freeway traffic, they ride onshore ocean air currents towards Springville and Spanish Hills neighborhoods. This mix of significant emissions should be cumulatively analyzed for air quality impacts. There are over 1,300 housing units in Springville on the Springville specific plan. Many of these residents are starter homes for people with their young children. There's no mention of cumulative toxic air contaminant loads when combined with adjacent airport emissions. The Costco site will be in the proximity of the departure flights for Camarillo Airport. I hope that you will make your decision. I hope before you make your decision on the Costco project, you will think ahead of what Camarillo will be like if it is approved and built. The Planning Commission members and our City Council need to think about who will be responsible for these change impacts to our community.
I'm sorry, but we have to cut, your time is up.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
You're welcome. And next we have Meryl Berge.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Meryl Berge, and I live in the Camarillo sphere of influence. As we are all now well aware, climate change is not limited by boundaries. We're all within the climate sphere of influence, and it impacts us all. Projects considered piecemeal by adding revisions to outdated environmental analysis done in the past should not be the standard we set for evaluating projects in 2023 as our region breaks warming records year after year. Costco is one of only 3 of the largest S&P 50 companies that have yet to set a major climate commitment. Specifically, Costco has not set Scope 3 targets, which include the pollution and emissions from cars and trucks that utilize their 572 gas stations. As a company with 2023 revenues of $242 billion and a 2023 net income of $6.3 billion, they have the resources to ensure their properties mitigate the full extent of their carbon emissions. A TDM fund is a pittance contribution to offset the 42 pound per day VOC emissions noted in Table 3, Appendix B, Air Quality Impact Evaluation from the gasoline dispensing facility. A one-off payment that has no reporting requirements, no impact analysis, and no accounting for future pollution and GHG emissions. On page 6 of Appendix B, the Air Quality Impact Evaluation, Ramboll evaluated the efficiency metric of the project defined as the total emissions divided by the service population. The service population is based on daily vehicle car trips. The daily vehicle car trips are based on traffic studies done by consultants that have conducted numerous traffic impact studies on behalf of Costco. Bottom line, how can communities possibly identify and evaluate the cumulative air quality impacts of sources close to surrounding neighborhoods if projects are reviewed piecemeal, based on combinations of past analysis and Costco-aligned consultants? In the MND, the Springville development of 1,350 homes was identified as an adjacent sensitive receptor. Residents breathing the adjacent 101 freeway pollutants, which is also a level F hotspot on many occasions, the proposed Costco traffic and fueling stations, and the increased volume of the proposed jet fuel emissions at the airport is a nexus of pollution sources that should be analyzed with a complete, comprehensive EIR for the cumulative air impacts on that neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that hadn't submitted a card that would like to put a card in and speak? Okay. Do we want to have, I know we don't answer anything, any questions? Does the applicant want to address any of the issues that were brought up?
Once again, for the record, Dale Goldsmith, AGD. I'd like to address a few of the comments that were articulated by the public. First was the cumulative impacts. As Christine Connolly mentioned, the traffic analysis did have cumulative impact analysis because the original project was a baseline condition, a related project that was analyzed in subsequent traffic studies, and there's a list of them in the staff report. The trips are less from the current project than the original project, so therefore cumulative traffic impacts were adequately assessed. With regard to cumulative air quality impacts, including toxic air contaminant impacts, as I mentioned previously, the city uses the methodology of the Air Pollution Control District. They have a single threshold for both project-specific and cumulative impacts. If a project's impacts are below the threshold, both project-specific and cumulative impacts would be less than significant. And in this case, it's less than significant with mitigation. If an EIR was done, it would, the EIR would include the exact same analysis. There wouldn't be any additional analysis because it is the Air Quality Pollution Control District that dictates the methodology and the significance threshold, and the city follows that. So we don't think any additional analysis is warranted. Indeed, there's no methodology for such analysis. Regarding the term piecemeal, I've been a CEQA lawyer since CEQA was young. And piecemealing basically means when you're splitting up a project into small chunks to evade review. It's not, this is a different situation. There's a tiering going on here. There was a prior review, and then a subsequent analysis that's based on that. CEQA encourages that. CEQA isn't about producing paper, it's trying to mitigate impacts, it's provide disclosure. This document provided disclosure and mitigated all impacts to less than significant. And indeed, this analysis included not only the Costco, but development of the balance of the site with the original shopping center project. So there was no piecemealing or chopping up. The whole of the project was analyzed consistent with CEQA. Regarding the independent, the independent study and the suggestion that perhaps Costco cooked the books, that was implicit, I think, in a couple of the comments. Well, it's true that Costco did provide a couple of the technical studies by experts who are very familiar with Costco and have a vast reservoir of information to make sure that analysis is conservative and accurate. The city independently, and their consultant, independently reviewed all those studies, and it was the city and not Costco who prepared the second subsequent M&D. So the CEQA document reflects the independent judgment of the city as required under CEQA. And indeed, CEQA allows for the city to rely on specialized studies as they did in this case. There's nothing untoward about it. It's done many places, many cities, many counties all over the state. Lastly, regarding biology, as mentioned previously, the site is a degraded site. Well, it's possible that there are birds that fly there periodically to forage. Birds don't stay in one place. This isn't like some rare newt in a pond that you're filling the pond in and there's no other habitat for them. Birds travel around and they travel a lot of places. This isn't an indispensable piece of open space, and indeed, it's degraded and it has been zoned for commercial uses for many years. And therefore, it would be inappropriate to keep it in its current degraded open space, and it would provide really no biological benefits because of the poor quality of habitat at the site. I think that was all the comments, or at least all the pertinent comments. I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you for consideration. We would respectfully request that you follow the staff's recommendation and approve the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, then, public hearing is now closed. And we can go on to our comments, but before we do that, can I have the architectural review?
Yes, you may.
Okay, just wait, hold on just a minute.
To respond.
Okay, we're going to open public comment just for a question to the applicant. Can we do that? Can I open it back up for a minute or not?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay.
Just to follow up, thank you, Chairwoman, to council's comments. So about the local threshold, because this has been discussed extensively. As I understand, the local threshold is really the floor, but not the ceiling. And in light of additional facts and evidence that the project may result in significant impacts, so those should be considered. Is that not correct?
I would really, no, I don't believe that's correct. The Air Pollution Control District, for the criteria pollutants of concern and also for health risks assessment, have a quantitative threshold. And if you're below the threshold, impacts are less than significant, and that can be with mitigation. If you're above the threshold, impacts are significant. It is a bright line that the Air Pollution Control District has considered. If you're referring to Appendix G is a direction, but the way it's implemented by the district and by this city is with those quantitative thresholds. There is no ambiguity.
Okay, I have a different understanding about that, but you keep repeating that there's with mitigation measures, the impacts fall below the threshold. I don't see that conclusion in the document, and it also was highlighted for us in the control district's letter that states reducing emissions may not be enough to bring emissions down to less than significant levels. So I just want to clarify that for the
that's not how
record.
I read that. I would respectfully disagree, and I would also disagree respectfully that I believe the subsequent MD is quite clear that the impacts would be less than significant with mitigation. I can read it out loud if you give me another moment, if you prefer.
No, that's okay. Just want to clarify for the record. And then I have a question for the city in response to the public comment from the owner of the Chevron station and the impacts to local business. I believe that CEQA analysis also includes urban deterioration based on impacts to local businesses and other assets. Is that something that was considered by the city?
That is typically under aesthetics, and that was not something that we saw as potential impact. So that specific analysis on urban decay was not included.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay. We're all, no more questions? Okay, then, public comments are closed. We will go to the architectural review report.
Okay, thank you. So Jackie presented the architectural elements of the proposed Costco building, as did the Costco architect who weighed in on some of our questions. And it's the Airport North specific plan and the heritage zone requirements are similar here, where styles that include early American architecture are referenced. The project is designed in early California architecture with sloped roof at entry, clay roof tiles, and off-white panels. Sorry you're hearing this for the third time tonight. With dark bronze cornice and limestone and brick veneers, and is therefore consistent with the airport and heritage requirements. The building heights have been approved by Camarillo Airport and determined to be within the allowable limits under the federal aviation regulations and the aviation easement held by the County of Ventura. As such, the Architectural Committee voted to recommend to Planning Commission approval of the architectural elements for this application.
Okay. Any questions to the architectural review? No. Can we move to, haven't done this for a while. We move to accept the, pardon? Okay, well, that's what I was asking, if we had any.
My only comment would be I appreciate the comments and the presentation by the city and the applicant, as well as I very much appreciate the written comments, as well as the people who took time out of their lives to be here tonight and share their feelings on the topic. I appreciate all of that, and it's all impactful in its way. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate all the presentations too, along with all of the comments. Because of the late receipt of those two county letters that we talked about before from the Air Pollution Control District and County RMA, I'm a little unclear as to how we can make sure that those items are addressed, not necessarily item by item. I heard from the applicant that a couple of the items for the air quality list were not acceptable, but that most of them were, is what I believe I heard this evening. So I'd like to, I like this project, but I'd also like to have some assurances that those letters will be addressed, and I'm not sure how to go about that. I don't know if staff has comment on that or not.
Yeah, if the Planning Commission would like to incorporate the comments from the Air Pollution Control District, you just have to do that by just generally acknowledging that and reading that into the record for the call for the resolution. So when you make the motion, you'd say to approve, the resolution with the comments generally described as in their comment letter to the city.
Okay.
And we could take those comments and incorporate into the resolution.
Okay, so probably wait for all commissioner comments before we do that?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
That's it for me.
all right. So, yeah, I was thinking we had to approve like their comments and stuff on the architectural design first before we got into comments, so. I guess we're just going to comments, correct?
Yes, we're at commissioner comments right now.
Okay. Any comments on this side,
Yeah, my comments.
on the project?
Yeah, I appreciated also all the public input and the people that came out tonight and the letters that we received, and also appreciated the details of the staff reports that we had to review, and then the comments tonight, further explaining them. And I think the second subsequent M&D, may not be perfect based on the comments we got, but in my opinion, I think it was adequate to address this project. And I think I'd defer to the further comments, and then we'll call for a resolution.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I again want to thank the staff and the applicants and the members of the public, especially those who really took the time to learn about the project and go through voluminous documents and provide very valuable feedback. That was certainly helpful for my own analysis. And to still, to appear and some of you still be here as we're nearing 9 p.m. So thank you very much for your engagement. This is a project that, again, has generated a lot of interest and concern and support. We're not weighing the merits of the project in terms of, the benefits and the detriments to the community as a whole, or making policy considerations. Certainly this is, a fair employer for the most part in terms of wages and benefits, and has beneficial practices such as local hiring, as was expressed by the applicant. And it will certainly add to the city's tax revenue, and just create a lot of jobs and add convenience to a lot of members. But that's not what we're deciding here, right? What we're deciding is whether the proposed project with the changes satisfies the legal standards. And so, I will say that, that the city certainly can choose to prepare a subsequent mitigated negative declaration if it determines that the possible significant impacts will be reduced to insignificance through the implementation of mitigation measures. That is a legal standard. Based on the discussion tonight and the various components of the substantial changes to the project, and we at the end learned that the tire center includes batteries, the tanks, the fuel station, the pharmacy, a number of components that were not identified in the actual document. They were identified in the report, but were not assessed. And so I feel like there are gaps in the analysis of those impacts that doesn't allow us to substantiate the conclusion that significant impacts will be reduced to a level of insignificance with mitigation measures. We just don't have that analysis. Overall, I feel like there's a substantial opportunity to improve this project with additional conditions and mitigation measures, some of which were very helpfully proposed by the Air District. And going to the comment by my fellow commissioner of, ensuring that these are incorporated. I think beyond just incorporating the comments in the record, it'd be helpful to include these mitigation measures, and specifically the district recommended all feasible on-site mitigation be proposed prior to contributing to the fund program. And the district just included some as examples, right? And there's a list here, but certainly there could be others. We have very creative and sophisticated applicant and staff. So I would like to see an analysis of the full effect of the impacts, and then also greater discussion and inclusion of mitigation measures and conditions. And not just to strengthen the compliance, but also to serve the public's interest. and engaging and understanding. So, I am concerned about that standard having been met and whether this requires an EIR. I think that needs to be looked at much more closely. And at minimum, a draft with the revisions that needs to be recirculated to the public.
Okay. No comments? Do you have any additional comments?
Actually, I do.
Okay.
To the extent that state and federal regulation requires adherence to things like tank construction, tank regulations, monitoring, and the like, by following those statutes, it seems to me that compliance would be obtained. And that's sort of how a society we do things. The federal government passes things that kind of protect all of us. The state protects here. And it would not behoove of the city to sort of reinvent the wheel with certain regulations. So I'm comfortable that adherence with, especially our state's great environmental protections, I think that the adherence would be obtained respectfully.
Thank you. Commissioner Murphy, did you have comments?
The important thing to me is that local adherence, local public agency adherence is achieved to the extent possible. So we've mentioned the letter, the Air Quality Control District's letter, and there's bullet points there of feasible on-site mitigation, that additional on-site mitigation that has been suggested by the district, all of which I believe I heard from the applicant are acceptable to the applicant except for compressed work schedules and reducing the number of fuel pumps or staging area capacity. I think if we can cooperate with the county on that, and also I mentioned the RMA letter that has a number of items in there that they've approved it as is, but they want to make sure that the county is contacted for certain items, and those things can be added to the conditions of approval. So that's what I was suggesting earlier, that at a minimum we that I would be making a motion to add that to our consideration for approval.
Okay. Let's see. And keep looking at this project, and I understand like both sides, and I know when I first looked into it and read through what we had initially, trying to follow the EIR to the different steps, it didn't seem like it flowed quite all the way to me. And then when I read the answers from staff to a lot of the questions that were presented to them, and it talked about all the different steps that I hadn't seen at first from different reviews at different times for different intersections and different projects, then it seemed to fit that we did get from A to B to C to me. And I've read the questions that all of you have submitted, listened to your comments, and I've listened to the experts on our staff and the experts from outside that have put in information on the EIR and how that runs. That's not one of my most knowledgeable things, but listening to it, I have to think that when we're listening to the experts from the outside and inside the city, that they do know, what they're talking about and all the factors that go into it. And I think there's going to be, to me, a lot of benefit to the area for this project, but I do understand that there are still some things, and I think that if we can get it, everything added to that needs to be filled in from the letters that we received from the other jurisdictions, that it's going to be a good project. Knowing this area has been approved for commercial infill for many years. It's never been set to be a vacant lot or a natural preserve, nature preserve. That one and the one across the street, unfortunately, they have been approved for commercial or industrial use for many years. So, to me, I think we've pretty much fulfilled, what we needed to look at for this. So, any other comments?
Yeah, I think I'm prepared to vote on it tonight with, along the line of Tom's motion, and would your motion be to include the items in that letter from the county, but with the exception of the pumps and the compressed schedules, consistent with what the applicant agreed to?
Yes, so my motion would be to, if we are to decide on this tonight, to decide on the addressing the comments that are in the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District letter dated December 4th, 2023, specifically item 7, which are APCD additional site mitigation measures, all of which it is our understanding that the Costco representative is in agreement with, except for compressed work schedules and reducing the number of fuel pumps or staging area capacity. That's the first letter. The second letter is that by by Ventura County Resource Management Agency, dated November 15th, 2023, in which a number of items that involve the county's need to permit and be notified of all appear to be items that can be added to the conditions of approval. So the motion would be that both of those items would be adhered to one way or the other.
No. Comments are closed. No.
Is that a sufficient motion?
So the next step would be the call for resolutions, and then we can go on the motions.
You don't have to vote on the motion first, or no?
You.
Oh,
So,
Okay.
So the next step would be the call for the reading of the resolution.
Oh, call for, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we have two resolutions for the Planning Commission tonight. The first one is the environmental document, the resolution number PC 2023-28, resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving second subsequent mitigated negative declaration MND 2023-4.
Okay.
And so do we make the motion with Tom's addition on that? Is that the appropriate time to do that?
Yes, that would be the time.
Okay. I make that motion with the addition of the conditions that Tom read into the record.
I'll second. Oh.
does Commissioner Lamone have another motion to make?
I do, yes.
Okay.
So do we hear both of the motions first and then vote? How do you?
I haven't had that occasion before.
So I'll go ahead and address the question, and if the city attorney feels the need to jump in, please do so. So we do have one motion on before the Planning Commission, and it would be, I think it would be appropriate to take action on that motion first, and then if it doesn't pass, then another motion could be proposed. Okay.
Did you have a second? I'll take the second on the first motion.
Is there a need for a motion to approve of the motion?
Yeah.
Or I've already made it
Made and
No, I'm
seconded.
just,
Is it made and seconded already?
So there's a first and a second.
Okay.
we do have a first and
Vote.
second. So we can't,
So we vote?
please vote. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. So that passes with 4 in favor and 1 opposed.
The second resolution for the Planning Commission tonight is resolution number PC 2023-29, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving a commercial plan development modification, CPD 226M5, for the construction of a new 163,397 square foot retail warehouse with a freestanding fueling station and a conditional use permit CUP 422 for the off-sale of alcohol beverages located south of US 101, north of West Ventura Boulevard, approximately 980 feet east of Springville Drive and west of Home Depot.
I would motion to accept and waive any further readings.
I'll second that.
Please vote. Did they turn us off?
So just for the record, the vote was 4-1.
Okay.
So will there be a second motion from Commissioner Limon on this? No? Okay, I didn't catch that. Got it, okay. I just want to make sure.
Okay. All right, so this one is done.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Take a 2-minute
take
break?
How about a 5? Yes, we're going to take a break for, will 5 minutes do it, or do we need 10? Huh? 10 minutes, okay.
was a preschool teacher, so she has, she's actually watching.
What?
Grandkids 3 days a week, so.
All right. We are back in session and on to our next item, which has to do with proposed zoning ordinance, amending certain sections and adding recommendations. Staff report, please.
Yes, our second item for public hearings tonight will be presented by James Fowler, our senior planner.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'll endeavor to be relatively quick, but I hope you'll be patient as we go through. So to start off, we're making updates related to SB 6. SB 6 allowed housing development in commercial zones so long as they don't abut industrial. Applicants have to commit to a skilled and trained workforce requirement, and any such development has to comply with objective development standards in our code. AB 2011 is similar, but it's a little more expansive in that it's exempt from CEQA. They do need to pay prevailing wage. It is more restrictive than SB 6 geographically, so it can't be next to the freeway, and there's a few other caveats baked in there as well. It also needs to, any such development under AB 2011 needs to comply with objective standards, either the city's objective standards for a certain type of AB 2011 project or a commercial corridor project, which the law articulates a certain set of standards. Then we have AB 2221. These are ADU changes. The big front runner change for this is that under certain circumstances, ADUs can infringe into the normal front setback of 20 feet. Now, we've written it in such a way as we'll keep that to the bare minimum possible. So if they can fit an 800 square foot ADU and maintain a 19-foot setback instead of a 20 feet setback, that's what we're going to require. But that's how the law is. Similarly, SB 897 ADU changes. This mainly relates to ADU height limit increases. Now, up to a maximum of 18 feet with an additional 2 feet for roof pitch within a half mile of the Metrolink, 18 feet for a proposed multifamily, multi-story, or I'm sorry, an ADU on a lot with an existing or proposed multifamily, multi-story dwelling, and then 25 feet for attached ADUs. AB 2334 is an update to the density bonus law. It's specifically for 100% affordable projects, and it allows unlimited density for 100% affordable projects and a height increase of 33 feet or 3 stories within very low vehicle travel areas. Very low vehicle travel areas has that definition defined there, but it's a little bit of a nebulous term. To some extent, it would be up to the developer to say, well, this is my area of consideration. So compared to this area of consideration, I'm a very low vehicle travel area. So it's a little bit loosey-goosey how the state wrote it, but that's the definition they provided us.
Do we have any place in Camarillo that would fit that definition that you can think of?
Well, I would say a number of places. I mean, this is a kind of a crazy example, but you can think of something like Leisure Village, where maybe people drive a little bit less. That could very well qualify. So then we have AB 682, another update to density bonus law. This is a real specific update. It's for something called shared housing projects. The general idea of a shared housing project is you have units that are sharing a common kitchen or dining area. So I don't know, it's more like almost like dormitory style living, but this law basically just applies existing density bonus law to shared housing projects. AB 2097 applies to 1/2 a mile radius of the Metrolink station. We kind of touched on this in our previous informational meeting. I won't belabor the point, but essentially the city is much more limited in what parking standards it can apply in that 1/2 a mile radius. Finally, we received a letter from HCD asking us to tune up our urban dwelling unit code. So we're proposing some changes in response to HCD's comments. We're not trying to be overly, I guess, difficult with HCD, but there were a few areas of their letter where we were wanting some clarification on some of the things they were asking for. So certain things we are agreeing to do, and other things we're saying, could you explain this a little bit more? And we'll go from there. So we haven't heard back yet on those things we've asked for clarification on in their original letter. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
Of course.
Comments?
So if we're doing it, it seems like kind of a full-scale change of these things to bring us up to date, which makes perfect sense, but there's still a little tail end that isn't resolved. Wouldn't it be more efficient just to wait till we get that and do the whole thing all at once?
So in talking with the city attorney's office, that's actually a point I somewhat brought up for a portion of it. And what they said was, we want to make sure we're showing that we're good faith moving forward with this. So we don't want to seem like we're dragging our feet, especially for things we know we're going to agree to. So that for that portion, it's kind of just good faith.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah, it did seem like the HCD sent the letter in, June of last year, and you folks, the staff responded within a couple months, and you have not heard back from HCD on that yet.
We have, historically, they've been a little bit slow to respond.
No kidding.
Yeah.
The one question I have has to do with Assembly Bill 2221, accessory dwelling units. So the city will be required to relax the front yard setback. I think I saw somewhere in staff report 19 feet, but I think that was just being used as an example. That wasn't like a hard number. But is there a hard number for, you can't go 1 foot from the sidewalk, right?
There is not a hard number, but we do, as a local government, have a duty to protect the health and safety of our neighborhoods. So I guess on a case, it would depend. The floor is kind of on a case-by-case basis. If going to a 0-foot setback created a health and safety hazard, then we would need to push back on that for that reason. So to directly answer your question, there's no specific floor. We just need to make sure there's never a health and safety concern by having such a low setback that maybe you can't see cars leaving a driveway or something to that effect, where an issue arises because of the extremely low setback.
Got it. And is the 4-foot side and rear yard setbacks, are those set so that you can't, there's not wiggle room beyond that? Like, let's say they widened it to 2-foot setback, because there's a lot of properties that have 0-foot setbacks. So if you had a 2-foot setback and then could keep that 20-foot setback, is that a possibility, or is that are the 4-foot?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, so the 4-foot setbacks, they are a hard and fast limit for any sort of new construction. Let's say you had a strange property, or not that strange, I guess we have certain areas of town that have a very low setback for their side or rear, maybe even lower than 4 feet. If you're converting existing space, then you are exempt from the 4-foot side and rear setback requirements. But if it's new construction, you always have to adhere to those 4-foot rear and side setbacks, no matter what.
Okay, so if you have an existing structure and you're building an ADU, you can grow that to how close to the side yards?
To 4 feet.
Okay, the 4-foot is a...
Yes. Yes, if you're...
New construction or existing, adding to exist. Oh, I see what you're saying. I misunderstood you. New construction is new construction, so...
Right, if you're adding to it, that's new construction, but if the existing footprint is closer than that 4 feet rear or side setback, that new construction is exempt from, or I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking. If there's an existing building that infringes in that 4-foot side or rear setback, and then that existing building is being converted to an ADU, it does not need to adhere to the 4-foot rear and side setbacks for the existing space. But any new space that's being built would need to adhere to those setbacks.
Yeah, you can't build into a 4-foot setback. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Of course.
So it seems like we pretty much have no choice. We have to comply. Do we have a deadline where that has to occur? And if you don't meet that deadline, what's the consequence?
It's a moving target. They're always updating state law, so we as a smaller jurisdiction do our best to keep a pace with that as best we can. There's not a hard and fast deadline, but kind of to the good faith effort point I made earlier, we always try to make this good faith effort to get into compliance as soon as possible. And if we happen to know that an area of our code really does not comply with state law, we just won't enforce that area of our code because it's defying state law. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
On the setback as well. I think you explained this already, but I think because of my concern, I wasn't able to fully grasp it. The front setback, I'm looking for that D setbacks and lot coverage. So when it's a minimum of 4 feet of the front setback?
No. So for ADUs, for new construction ADUs, it's always a minimum of 4 feet required setback from the rear and side property lines. But what this new law is saying, that let's say you had a property where you had a very small backyard, maybe like an almost non-existing backyard, and it wasn't physically possible to fit an 800 square foot ADU. And this idea of an 800 square foot ADU is sort of like a protected concept under state law. They protect this 800 square foot ADU, and then if it goes beyond that, it's kind of more under local control. But if it's an 800 square foot ADU or less, and you can't physically fit it in any place on the property that's new construction, without infringing in that 20-foot front setback, you can infringe into that 20-foot front setback. But the way we've written it is to keep that to the smallest amount possible. So that's why I gave the example of if they could somehow conceivably do it by only going at a 19-foot front setback, that's what we would require, and so on and so forth. But we can't preclude them from building an 800 square foot ADU if they have no other place on the property to place it.
Under that circumstance, it could go into the 20-foot setback. Are you saying that the standard to be set by the city is 19?
No, I'm sorry, I should stop using that same example over and over again. It could very well be 15 feet or 14 feet. It's just whatever, we would push for the maximum setback, for requiring the maximum setback we could under the circumstance while still meeting the requirements of state law. So if it was conceivable to fit an 800 square foot ADU while maintaining a 15-foot setback, we would require them to do a 15-foot setback, and we wouldn't let them do a 14-foot setback because we can see they can physically do it with a 15-foot setback.
Yeah.
If they can't do it with the 15-foot setback, then we would allow it with a 14-foot setback, and so on and so forth. So the setback continues to decrease if they don't have physical space to fit the ADU without infringing into that front setback.
But,
To
yeah.
zero. To zero.
I was going to say, what keeps them from going all the way to the curb? If that's, and
Then it
they
would
can't
be a
even
health
get an
and safety
800 square foot
analysis,
in
right?
there.
If it blocked cars pulling out.
Yeah, it would come down to health and safety concerns. So if we could identify a valid health and safety concern, then we could push back on that. I think in most cases, it's going to be feasible to, in some way, fit an 800 square foot ADU without going down to literally zero. You know, they could probably fit it with, I would be making up numbers, but we think in most circumstances, they could fit an 800 square foot ADU without going down to zero setback.
That's like 20 by 40. So
It
if you
is.
could only had like 20 feet going across, you'd be wanting to come out 40 feet.
But if there is any other place on the lot, so if they have a backyard that is of a decent size, they can fit it in the rear, or maybe even in the side yard. But in certain circumstances, you're right, we could unfortunately see ADUs that creep into the front yard in a way we may not like. But that's unfortunately state law.
They could choose to build smaller than 800, can't they? I mean, there's nothing that says they have to only build an 800 square foot?
No, there is nothing that says they have to build an 800 square foot ADU. It's just this protection, so to speak, of state law saying they're allowed to infringe into the front setback only extends to ADUs that are 800 square feet or less.
Okay.
Thanks for that. That's so interesting.
Well, and I found a little bit of controversy, and I can't remember which 2 pages, because there was the one page that said they can build out, in the front yard, like unlimited, but then there was another place that said there was a minimum frontage needed. So, I couldn't quite correlate, and I didn't write down the 2 pages and stuff that I found, those 2 items that kind of contradicted each other. So,
The other question I have is regarding the driveway access. So it says, an ADU must be served by the same driveway access to the street as the existing primary dwelling unit unless it has access from a public alley. So you couldn't create an ADU and restrict them from parking on the driveway. You have to provide access, the same access to, is it cars or just like being able to get from the street to the ADU?
So, as for someone, if you had a traditional single-family home with a standard driveway and your driveway doesn't creep into your backyard in any way, you can imagine most single-family lots, the driveway doesn't go past the house or anything, you can put an ADU in your backyard and there's no requirement to make the driveway somehow extend into the backyard. It's served by the existing driveway, so there's no requirement to make the driveway extend into a backyard or something like that. It's served in the sense that the property is still served. You can get out of your car and just walk around the house. It's served in that way, I guess.
It isn't a requirement that the ADU occupants be able to park on the driveway?
No. And then, if I may, I think to your point, Beverly, there is a section in our code where we still say you are required to maintain a 20-foot setback. And then there's this other section that, and it's actually just mirroring what state law says, that effectively says, not basically ignoring whatever you need to on this list to get you to an 800 square foot ADU. You can ignore these things as needed based on the circumstance. So we want to, whenever possible, continue to require the 20-foot setback. But because of state law, there may be instances where we cannot. So that's kind of what we're going for.
Okay. I will kind of have a question, though, with Leisure Village, because there was a comment somewhere in there that some of these didn't apply to properties that were in a nonprofit corporation.
So specifically for Leisure Village is a common interest development, and people don't own the exteriors of their home.
We do.
Because of that, and indeed their front yards are
We don't
common.
own our front yards.
Exactly. So someone could never put an ADU in the front
Right.
yard because without the permission of the HOA, which I think is very unlikely they would get. So because it's common interest in that way, someone couldn't do an ADU in the front yard.
But we're also, and I can't remember where I read it, but it did say, list that if you're in a nonprofit corporation, the property's in a nonprofit corporation, but it doesn't spell what type of nonprofit corporation they're talking about. And most of your HOAs are nonprofit corporations.
So ADUs circumvent ADUs circumvent HOA law for the most part, but common interest developments like Leisure Village, townhomes where people don't own the exterior of their homes, things like that, they would need the permission of the HOA because by necessity they would be building in the common area or they would be modifying the exterior, which they don't own. An example of an HOA where someone could build an ADU, and it may seem crazy to us, is a place like Village at the Park, which because, of course someone couldn't put the ADU in the common area, but since for a lot of Village at the Park, they own their front yards and what
Right.
have you, and their backyards, of course, they could do it there.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, I'd say call for resolution if everybody's ready, yeah. I'll open the public hearing, I guess.
Oh. Do we have anything from a public hearing? I didn't see any cards, so there isn't anybody here, so I'm going to close the public hearing.
Now we can call for resolution, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So resolution number PC 2023-30, a resolution recommending approval to the City Council of an ordinance amending certain sections and adding Chapter 19.37 to Title 19 of the Camarillo Municipal Code to implement state law related to residential development in commercial zones, accessory dwelling units, density bonus, parking requirements, and urban dwelling units.
I make the motion that we adopt as read and waive any further readings.
Okay. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Okay, then we go to, and this just says discussion item.
The staff presentation will be made by our senior planner, Paul McLaren.
Good evening, Chair Vandermeulen, Vice Chair Edsel, fellow commissioners. So tonight I'm presenting an industrial plan development project on Cortez Circle over on the eastern side of the city. And fortunately, the city's got these great pictures and you can actually see this development right here. But moving on as quickly as possible. So the applicant seeks approval of an industrial plan development permit to construct a 4-unit industrial business park. This project is 4 lots comprising a total of 2.8 acres. The square footage of the industrial space on these lots would be 39,411 square feet, and code would allow up to 20% of that space to be office space. The proposed construction is a tilt-up concrete building in a modernist architectural style, and the 4 units range from 8,623 square feet to 10,393 square feet. Again, these are 4 separate lots, individual legal lots with 4 separate buildings on them, although some of them do share a common wall, and so they can be sold individually or they could be rented. So the location is, if you look here on the map, we have Adolfo Road coming in here, the 101 freeway to the south, Conejo Creek is to the east, and there's a drainage ditch that goes through here. And so this distance from the freeway to the project site is more than 500 feet, so this project is not in the heritage zone. I just want to make sure that that's clear, that it is not in the heritage zone. So background, in 1978, this is kind of what the project looked like, and at that point in time, this is when they started trying to plan for this area to be developed by passing a tract map in 1980 for the area north of the freeway and east of Camino Ruiz and west of Conejo Creek. So it was a very large area that was divided up into a number of lots. Here's some of the lots, and then our lots are these ones located here, which are lots 46 and 51. Subsequently, after this didn't get developed in 1980, it still wasn't being done in 86. There was no development going on. It was still agricultural land. And then they went ahead and decided to further subdivide these, the original 2 lots into 6 lots in a tract map in 1990. And then in 1991, they actually started getting construction underway where they actually built Cortez Circle. They actually filled in the, or buried the drainage ditch and started grading and rough grading the entire site. So all the rough grading on this project and the negative declaration that was done for this project was all done back in 1991. And since then, the project has basically stayed undeveloped. The development has happened around the project, but not specifically on these 4 lots in question. So this is what the project looks like today. You can see the direction we're looking is south, and that is the new Trojan Storage Building directly to the south of the project. You can see that this project is, again, it's been rough graded. All the services and utilities have been added. The roads have been added. And every year annually, in order to prevent fires, the project is cut down and it's brush cut, cleared to prevent fires, and the property just starting to become overgrown. So this property is in the general plan zone for industrial, and the zoning is limited manufacturing. All of the properties surrounding them are also industrial and limited manufacturing. Just across Adolfo, though, you do have medium density residential, and then to the south, it's agricultural, and to the east, it's open space. Here's the site plan for the proposed project. So here you can see this is the first of the 4 lots, lot 11, and that is the actual footprint. The rest of the lot is landscaping and parking and loading zones. There is a shared access easement agreement that's actually in the tract map for this property. So this already exists on the tract map, that this is a shared access between the northern property and this property. This is lot 12. And there is the footprint. Again, the roadway goes and the parking goes all the way around the buildings. This is lot 13, and lot 13's footprint, and it also has a shared access agreement in the tract map with the lot to the north. This is lot 14, the last of the lots. There is their building footprint, and there is a shared access easement agreement here between lot 12 and lot 14, and this is also an easement for the Ventura County Watershed Protection District because of that channel to the south of the property. This is how they would get in and maintain that if necessary. So the elevations of the project, again, this is in a modernist style, which is allowed because it's outside of the heritage zone. So these are concrete tilt-up buildings. They are less than 30 feet in height, or they're about 30 feet 8 inches in height, which is 5 feet less than the zone, the maximum allowed for the zone, so they're shorter than the zone allows. They do meet all of the required setbacks. They are required to provide 81 parking spaces for this property, and they provide 106. They're required to provide loading zones for each of the units, and they provide all of those loading zones. One of the units being less than 10,000 square feet has a loading zone that is only 12 feet by 24 feet, which is also allowed by code because it's less than 10,000 square feet. The architecture has got both vertical and horizontal articulation. They're using concrete tilt-up that mainly it's painted to where it gives some striping and things like that that would look like wainscoting, but on the articulations that are kind of the darker colors, that is corrugated metal. So that it gives some texture to the building as well and adds some fluidity to the architecture. And then there are tower elements at each of the entrances, and each one of these tower elements has a different accent color so that you can very quickly and easily distinguish the different buildings from one another. There's also metal awnings over the roof or over the windows on the second floor, and they've provided some green screen planting material up against the walls as well to help break up some of the larger flat surfaces. The rear of the property it's 360-degree architecture, so you still see a lot of those architectural features even on the rear of the building where the loading is at. So this is a perspective of the building or buildings on lots 11 and 12. Again, they share a wall. So that's where the property line goes right through that wall. And then here are the buildings on 13 and 14. In this case, the accent color is blue. The blue here, it's been mentioned that the blue can pop quite a bit. The community design element does say that we are going for muted earth tones with jeweled accents. In my mind, jeweled accents would be ruby, sapphire, emerald. The blue, I think, fits with that. So you are getting some pops of color here. The intensity sometimes it can either seem more intense or less intense when it's printed, because the color just doesn't seem to come through very well with the printing. But the final color design and color will be up to the director to say, yes, this is an appropriate blue for this building. And then this is the rendering of this building. Again, in this case, we're looking towards the freeway, and that's the roundabout there. Fire departments looked at this. There's access all the way around the building. Again, it meets all the development standards for the zone. For environmental review, under the California Code of Regulations, Section 15332, this can be considered a Class 32 infill development because it meets all the general plan designation requirements and zoning to include all applicable policies of the general plan and regulations of the zoning. The project is on less than 5 acres and surrounded by other urban uses. It has no habitat or value as habitat for endangered, rare, or threatened species. Again, since 1991, for well over 30 years, this property has been rough graded and it's getting cleared every single year with brush cutters. The project will not result in any significant effects on traffic, noise, air quality, or water quality. And the project is adequately served because all the utilities and streets and everything are already built and in place. So based on staff's analysis, this project would qualify as a Class 32 exemption. So the city staff's recommendation is that you find the project exempt as a Class 32 exemption and that you adopt a resolution approving IPD 409 subject to the recommended conditions of approval. And that ends my presentation.
Any questions of staff? The Owners Association, the Commercial Owners Association that they set up, that will stay even if a unit is sold, right?
There's a specific condition of approval that's included that says when that first unit's sold, that actual association has to be created at that time.
Oh, not until one's sold?
Right.
Okay.
So it's a requirement of sell is that they create the association.
And then once they set it up, it stays?
Yes.
Okay. And we have an architectural review on this?
Can we open and close public hearing?
Oh, no public hearing on this one, it's just a discussion.
Yes, we do. I'm not going to repeat everything that Paul said, But it does, the elements are consistent with the general plan community design element and the general plan community design guidelines. There was some discussion about the entry accent colors. They do have a lot of pop to them, and it is, they really stand out when you're looking at the muted earth tones versus this interpretation of the jeweled accents. But with Paul's explanation, it looks very approvable. I'll put it that way. What I like about the project also is that it's conditioned to provide a public art display. We're starting to see some of those pop up around the city, and I really like what I see. We review those, and when this one comes along, we'll review that and just add something to the city. I like that. So, as such, the Architectural Committee Review Committee voted to recommend Planning Commission approval of the architectural elements for this application.
Okay. So that's where I got messed up on our other ones, because we didn't really take a vote and approve it. So, do we want to approve it? Do we need? Okay, all right. Then no other, do you have any comments on the architectural area?
Not on the architectural, no.
Or do you?
Oh, I just on the traffic
Oh.
update. I think that was master plan a long time ago. On the update, did it lower the rate of traffic, or it stay pretty much the same with the original ones?
So in this case, the evaluation for the traffic did actually show that the VMT would exceed the thresholds for the guidelines, but that with the mitigation measures included, to include carpooling, there's going to be a kiosk that's going to be present at a central location to the development that provides employees with the ability to find and track down carpools or van pools. And then there's also bicycle racks that have been provided as well, all traffic demand mitigation measures that would hopefully help to reduce. And according to the traffic study that was done, those kind of measures have been known to reduce the traffic by 15%, which would then lower this to below a significant level of VMT requirement.
Okay.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and on that traffic report, I like to see LOS studies, and the traffic report included that, and particularly in this area, there's a number of intersections involved in a lot of new construction. So to me, in some cases like this one, the LOS is more meaningful to me than the VMT. Just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, we like to keep the LOS in there because it helps to respond to a lot of questions that we also get. So we are doing the VMT because of CEQA, but we are doing the LOS because it's kind of a good measure that the public tends to understand a little bit better. And they also are more aware of how, they live in the area. They know how the intersections actually are and how this will impact those intersections.
Yeah. And just for the record, I had brought up to Paul about, it stated on the report that there were all these stop signs along Adolfo. But those are all on the cross streets. So there is no stop sign from the end of Adolfo to Santa Rosa Road. And once we get even more traffic coming into the businesses and stuff, because people drive fast there, and it's sometimes hard to get turned onto Adolfo. Even for me, a right turn from onto Adolfo coming down from Leisure Village, the road curves back, I can't see what traffic is coming. And then you've got the Department of Education, people leaving from work and want to make a left turn. And then there's just a lot of traffic on there. So at some point, I hope the city will look at a stop sign maybe midway through, something like that, that would slow traffic down a little bit.
Yeah, and I did speak with Jason Samonte And he also filled me in on something I wasn't unaware of, that there actually is a school associated with the Ventura County Education Building there. And so they actually is, at one point along Adolfo there, the speed is reduced to 25 miles per hour when there are children present. So that actually does slow the traffic down on Adolfo because of that speed limit.
When school's in session.
Whenever there's kids present. And I guess this school takes a lot of kids out for walks all day long, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Nothing else? Anybody want to call for resolution?
Resolution number PC 2023-31, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving a request by Robert Getch of DG Acquisition Number 7, LLC, for the industrial plan development permit for the construction of an industrial business park consisting of 4 units with a total of 39,411 square feet, located at 375, 380, 385, and 390 Cortez Circle within the limited manufacturing zone, further described as IPD 409.
I'll make a motion to waive further reading and vote for adoption.
I'll second.
Please vote. Okay. What does the director have for us?
So just one item tonight. This is the last meeting that we'll be having in the chambers as we know it.
Oh.
So for next year, we'll be moving to the library to conduct our planning commission meetings, while the city will be renovating the space.
Okay. The library on Las Postas, right? And,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
That's correct. So,
When's our next meeting?
so our next meeting will be in January. We haven't set it yet, but we'll be setting it in the.
Okay. And we'll get, after the first of the year, we'll get the new calendar for the year. And
Yes, that's correct. We'll adopt our meeting schedule for next year.
Anybody have any closing comments today for?
I think we ought to go home.
I want to say it's been a kind of an unpredictable year this year. We've, had a lot of spaces. We've had some big projects, some not so big. It's kind of been a different kind of year this year. I don't know.
I also think we just need to go home so I can reserve my comments for the next meeting, just on administrative housekeeping matters. But it is more a question for the staff. So if I have requests about how to facilitate information sharing and getting documents on a timely basis, is that something we should be discussing here during this section of the agenda, or is it something we can communicate on separately?
I think it will start separately, and then we'll see.
Okay. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for sending
Okay.
those documents, too.
Move to
How'd you get those so
adjourn.
early?
We'll approve it.
Second.
I'll adjourn the
You called
meeting.
it.